our triannual safety seminar. I want to let everybody know that we are going to be recording the whole day, and so it will be edited later as individual videos that can be looked at on demand. So apologize for getting things out. It was hard getting all the speakers at the last minute, and I'm grateful that they are taking their time to present today. Now, this year, I've tried to put emphasis on underground damage excavation and gas events, because we haven't had a PHMSA gas event, defined gas event, since 2003. And that is defined as a death or an injury requiring a hospitalization overnight, or $50,000 worth of damage in 1984 dollars, which in 2023 dollars is about $152,000, or 3 million cubic feet of gas leaked. So we've been very lucky compared to all the states around Delaware have had events every year. So we're very, very, very lucky. But I don't think it's going to continue. So I'm trying to get people to be aware of what happens when we have gas events and some of the gas events. And we're going to talk about underground damage also, which can also lead to gas events. So, and most of the data today is going to be jurisdictional data that we regulate, gas data, and not the non-gas underground damage stuff. So let me start that. We're going to have Jason Lyons with Delmarva 811. Then we're going to have Scott Marshall with Virginia Division of Utility and Railroad Safety, and then we're going to have Dave Applebaum with PHMSA. He's going to, and then we're going to have Melissa Matthew with PHMSA Accident Investigations, and then finally we're going to have the Pipeline Safety Trust. So I think it's going to be a really good program, and I think you'll enjoy it. I've seen Scott Marshall's talk. He was a co-instructor out in PHMSA TQ out of Oklahoma City. So any questions so far from anybody? No? Okay. What time is it?
It is 8:35, so I'm going to pull up your slideshow.
I don't know if I could talk for 45 minutes, but what?
Let's see. This is the one.
Yeah, that's it. Wow, this is okay. That's better. You going to share it? Oh wow, that's
So let me get off the screen. There we go. Screen sharing. Yep. Okay, so we've got the safety seminar on here.
no. They see an old screen or the slide.
They're seeing that.
Can't you just show the slide? Can you just slow the slide? The whole slide without the rest of the screen? What? Oh, great. Okay. 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 Don't worry about it for now. Okay. All right. Let's get started here. Let's go to the next page. Okay. Some of this stuff you already know, especially the operator personnel, but we could have some other people from out of state that don't know much about Delaware. We're a small state. So we have the natural gas pipeline operators of Delmarva Power. They're in the northern part of the state. Chesapeake Utilities, which also includes Elkton Gas as of 2020. And then we have Cherry Island Renewable Energy Landfill Gas. Okay. And so far as LNG, we have a peak shaving plant by Delmarva Power up in the city of Wilmington. Next page.
There.
Okay. So, and then we have 9 master meter operators, of which there are 14 inspection sites. And and then we have 13 propane operators, of which there's 123 inspection sites. Okay. Um, okay, we don't. The Delaware PSC does not regulate interstate transmission lines like Eastern Shore Natural Gas, which is a big transmission line runs down the center of the state. That's interstate, so that means it goes between states, and we don't have jurisdiction on that. We only have jurisdiction of gas that does not travel outside of the state boundaries. We don't have any liquid pipelines in state or interstate, and we only have jurisdiction on propane operators that have more than 10 customers hooked up to like a community system or tank system. So a lot of the propane stuff we don't regulate. Okay, so there's me, I'm the program manager. Then we have Chavis Bianco, uh, some of you are familiar with, and then we have a vacancy now because Bob Shafkin, he retired August 30th. So we're still actively trying to hire a replacement, and it's not happening very easily. So we'll keep trying. It's going to affect us because we lost 50% of our inspection capability, and then we have the underground damage prevention program. That's been in effect since really enforcement started in May of 21. Okay. And so we haven't been doing it that long, about 3 years. And it started off very lightly, and then we've been ramping up enforcement as time goes. We'll get into that later. And we also have Lorraine Paget here. She's a new admin, started in March, and we sorely needed her because she keeps up on all the record keeping and all the tracking of all the underground damage records, the NOPVs for underground damage, the consent agreements, and all that kind of stuff, and typing up the drafts and stuff. So she's very, very good, and also very good at Excel. So, I can look at that. Oh, okay. All righty. Now, I'm not. Here's a sheet that shows what kind of operators we have. We only have about 27 operators. That's not many. We're a small state, and but the good thing is that what's the important thing is that we have the inspection days over there. It's 212 we've done, and I would say that 63% of our inspection days are construction inspections. And I believe that has a lot to do with why we haven't had a gas event in Delaware, because we're out there looking at the operators and our contractors, internal, external, installing the pipelines. So and last in 2023 we did a total of 416 inspections. So that means 416 reports, and by two inspectors. And this is something we turn into PHMSA, and it's just a more detailed summary of the previous page. And you can see the different types of inspections on the top horizontal row, where you have the standard required inspections and construction and integrity management, and then operator qualifications. We have to make sure that they are continuously requalifying their installers, and we have follow-up time also. So you can see how it all adds up across the different types of operators that we have, So it's kind of boring. So let's go on. I know people are going to glaze over looking at this slide. All right. Now we're going to talk about some of the enforcement actions we've taken between 22 and 24. And so in 22 and 23, we issued 7 compliance actions containing 19 violations and a civil penalties of $14,000. Not a lot, okay, compared to some states, but it still has an effect. And so far in 24, we've issued 3 compliance actions, 11 violations, and penalties of $67,012, which is still compared to some states on the lower end. But most of the violations our inspectors are finding are not following their own written procedures, and that that that's bad. So, and then also sometimes we run across some of the operator staff is not as their qualifications have expired and they didn't renew them. So so that's not good either. And then sometimes equipment certifications are out of date and not maintained. And then we also look at the regulators, critical valves, leak surveys, and those things aren't always completed annually. So that's just some of the major ones that we see. Now here's a list of all the compliance actions kind of since 210 all the way up to 224. You can see the compliance actions and then the number of violations within those compliance actions and then the penalties. So not tremendous, but hey, we don't have any CAS events. So I still go back to the fact that we have a high percentage of construction inspections. And up until I think March 2020, there was PHMSA had no requirement on a percentage of construction inspections, but we've always done like 60%. And PHMSA now requires at least 20%. So I'll give you one example that I know off the top of my head, like Tennessee. I think they have like 150 operators. They weren't doing any construction inspections because they're so busy doing the required inspections that they didn't have time for that. So now they got to do at least 20%. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, now here's the territory of Delaware and Delmarva. Delmarva Power is the northern part, and Chesapeake Utilities is the lower half. And you can see the line going across just above Dover there that splits the two. And we have the total miles of distribution, the total miles of distribution, and a number of services that they have connected. Okay, and just to give you perspective, this is from north-south length of Delaware is about 96 miles. That's what ChatGPT told me. So, so it's a fair amount of miles of pipe in the ground, when you think about it. And most the public doesn't really aren't aware that there's that many miles and that many services. So now here is this came from the PHMSA portal. You can search by different things, and this shows you from 2015 to 2023 the miles of main. Okay, and you can see it increasing as time goes, and same thing with the services and the miles too. So a lot of people are moving into Delaware. Most of the population is north of the C&D Canal in the upper county, Newcastle County. The southernmost county, Sussex County. Most people don't know this, but it's the biggest county area-wise east of the Mississippi, but it's not population-wise. But I tell you, in the last 3 years, there's been a huge increase of people moving down there from New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. And so many people moved down the last 3 years that the population down in Sussex County was not expected until 2038. That's how many are down there now. So it's a boom. It's booming, and consequently, more gas is going in, and natural gas and propane. So you can see that that's all increasing. Also, the propane. Okay. All right, now this is a chart of another way of looking at the data in a graphical form of the gas distribution in Delaware, and you can see the orange is the total mile of the service lines, and the dark is the main. So it's going up, and not tremendously steeply, but it's going up. Um, let you look at that a little bit. All right. I The distribution, this is a little more data on distribution here in Delaware. We have 3,760-mile mains, 24 miles unprotected steel coated, 616 miles cathetically protected steel with that are coated, 41 miles of cast iron, and that should be completely replaced by 2027 because cast iron is leaks a lot, and most states have a cast iron replacement program. We're very lucky we just have that small amount. Some states have, you know, hundreds of miles of it, and often it's in urban areas, which is very expensive to replace. And then we have about almost 3,100 miles of plastic pipe. Most of it's by performance pipe. Delmarva uses medium density, and Chesapeake use high density, which means the high density can take higher pressures. So then we have the service lines. We have 2,691 miles of service lines, 81 miles unprotected steel, 190 miles of cathodically protected steel coated. Anyway, of that, 2,370 is the performance plastic pipe. And we have transmission lines. We have about 7 miles of cathodically protected steel. That's jurisdictional. That's not counting the Eastern Shore that goes down the middle of the state. That's jurisdictional to PHMSA. So we don't have anything to do with that. And PHMSA is the Pipeline Hazard Material Safety Administration. And then here we go, where we have the materials, steel. Of the steel, 70% are mains. Of the plastic, 56% are mains. So, okay, I'm not going to read this or anything. I'm just going to remind everybody we had this topic covered in 2021, where PHMSA is coming up with alternative actions to try to meet the NTSB wanting to have all service regulators installed outside or moved outside where possible. So this is just a reminder. It's still in effect, okay? And these are the requirements. I'm not going to go read them, but it's related to that issue. So I just remind everybody that don't forget that's still in force. So we want to try to move as much outside. Now I'm going to talk about the Delaware Underground Damage Prevention Program. That we were one of 4 states unacceptable. We weren't doing any enforcement, and PHMSA said we had to pass a law, and then once we passed the law, we had three years to get it into effect. So we passed the law in 2018, and it became effective in December 2020. So that was right about the time COVID hit. So that kind of kiboshed it for a lot of people, because of the COVID requirements. So we didn't really start enforcement until 2021. So we found out that warning letters are considered enforcement by PHMSA. So we wanted to start off very lightly to get people accustomed that the excavation damage laws are in effect. And so all of 2021, we just did warnings on just failure to call 811. And there was a lot of them, okay? And so that got people accustomed that this is starting up. And then in 2022, we started with fines on the failure to call 811, because you really can't get out of that. If you're out there digging without a ticket, you're guilty, okay? And everybody's required to get a ticket to dig. It's the law. And Jason Lyon will be going into that in more detail. And but anyway, the operators have when their utilities are damaged, they have 15 days to report it to us. Now, non-gas stuff, the only thing that gets reported to us is damages that are over $3,000. So that cuts out a lot of the comm cable stuff and a lot of the small stuff we don't see. And then all gas must be reported no matter what. So we have a website interface where operators come in and report. And we also have interface for contractors and private citizens they can also input if they see what they think is a violation. So it's all on our website. And this comes from the PHMSA annual report. So this data is from jurisdictional operators that have annual reports. That means operators that have more than 100 customers connected to their systems. We have some jurisdictional that are just under 100, so they don't turn in annual reports. So this is leaks by cause, and you can see that the number one damage here is due to excavation. And then the next one is what is that? Equipment. So it's done by equipment. So I'm not going to read each one, but you can look, and that's why we have enforcement, because there's still a lot of people out there that have to be more careful and damage less, especially gas. So and let's see. Some more. Is that it? Wait a minute, go back. How do I get back? I lost it.
Um,
I go over here.
You're still sharing the screen. No. Are we at the end?
No, I got two charts there. See those two charts? I need to show those. How do are they seeing that now?
Yeah, they are.
No, I see the beginning.
Yeah, it went back to the
Oh,
beginning.
oh, you went by it.
Yep, there you go.
Is that being shared now? Do you see the
yes,
pie chart?
They can see it. That's what they see.
Okay. All right. Now this comes off the PHMSA portal, data portal, and comes from their annual reports that operators turn in every year. And you can see that the damages in Delaware, majority of them are excavation in 23. The majority of them excavation practice is not sufficient. And now this is just gas. This is not everything else, non-gas, water, sewer, electric, and comm cable. That's not in this figure. So it's just gas, and you can see the excavation practice not sufficient. And then the next one would be the one call notification practice not sufficient, which is often digging without a ticket. So those are the major areas. Now let's go to the next one here. How do we do that?
Just scroll down.
Or just click on it. Okay, this is another one. Leak by cause. You can see there again. Did I cover this already? It looks very similar to what I did already. Wow, I must have. Yeah. Okay. I guess I must have missed that one early on and zoomed in. So we covered this one already. And what time is it?
It is 8:56.
So I got another 15 minutes. Oh my.
Well, I can pull the underground damage statistics up.
All right, pull that up. All right.
Go. Can talk about that.
Well, can we zoom? We can't zoom in on it anyway, can we?
You can do the view and make it bigger. Make it 200%.
All right. All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit here. Now, this includes the gas and non-gas underground damage, and you can see that Newcastle County has 54% of the damage, and that's where most of the population lives. So it's more urban, and it's in urban environments. It's easier to damage stuff because everything's closer together. And then you have Kent 12% and Sussex go to the 4%, and that was in 22. And then it looks roughly the same in 23 and 24 to date. It's kind of almost the same, a little less than Newcastle County. But, and then we go down here and what we use to collect the data in our website, we're using the Common Ground Alliance root causes. Okay, so we can sort things by these root causes, and I've assigned these 2-digit codes on here so we can easily sort, and we can see which of these root causes are causing the most problems and focus on the biggest root causes first, um, and to try to lower those down. So this was
If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the key. There you
okay.
go.
All right. So again, you can see now this is everything that failure to call 811 is the biggest, and then the next one is failure to verify marks, okay, before digging. So those are the big ones we're working on a lot on and finding on, and we're not trying to find on everything. So we also all the non-gas is it's the first violation is $0 to $500, and then the second one is 500 to $1,000. And again, that only covers items that were reported to us that were greater than $3,000 worth of damage. And then for the gas, we're now as of June 1 starting to find them more, and that can be up to $10,000 a day and no more than $100,000. Okay. So what we start off with a basis from that is we start with we're using $1,000 an inch diameter. So if it's a 4-inch pipe hit, we're going to start with $4,000. Then we're going to look at extenuating circumstances. We're going to get the view from the excavator, and then we'll probably have to go back and talk to the operator again. And the excavator may request a meeting. We discuss each violation, and sometimes there's circumstances where there it's just there was no way around it. Tree roots or some other physical parameter that's just so they don't always get fined or fines get reduced. So we take into account all these things, but we start off with the $1,000 per inch, and sometimes some violations are removed, some are reduced. Often in the consent agreement now, we're now if we have a violator that's a what do you call it, a bad actor who's hitting, damaging and damaging and damaging, we'll put in the consent agreement that they have to take some mandatory training, with Delmar Bay on one, and also the operators also offer training where they come right to the office of the excavator and give some training.
In some cases, we also require that they uh, take part in Chesapeake Utilities free gas pipeline safety and excavation damage prevention training. They've been great helping with that.
So I think we're done, right? Or unless you have any other data you have showed. Do you have anything else?
Well, this
Oh, there we
this
go.
is our damage comparison chart, which,
There we go.
and then we have the
Well,
damage repair cost
go
estimates.
with that first. Leave that up there for a while. And look at that.
All right.
And
So this is basically all the information that's in that bar graph that we had up there. And we stay pretty steady, but then when you look at the damage repair cost estimates, what they're hitting is different, because it goes from $500,000 for 2 years in a row up to 833,000 for, so over 750,000. And that we suspect that the reason for the surge is the huge amount of infrastructure that's being put in place this
yeah, you
year.
have a tremendous amount of buildings as a county, probably up north too, and then you have the fiber, the infrastructure fiber going in everywhere that the federal government is paying for, and so it's causing damage. Luckily, we haven't had any PHMSA events, but it's not to say that the damage is not leaking.
Yeah.
It's just not
We
at the
have
level.
gotten reports that we've had some out-of-state excavators damage gas pipelines uh, during their excavation projects, and then they bury the line again without calling 911 and reporting the damage, and just take off and flee the scene. So that's very concerning to us because that's asking for an event. So to date, we've sent out 84 warning letters and 40 penalty letters.
That's in 2024, right?
Yes.
Okay.
With a total of $32,350 in civil penalties assessed. As Wayne said, we are ramping up our program.
Yeah, and this is all for excavation damage, not the pipeline safety end of it.
We are putting a special focus on the repeat offenders and have begun requiring the mandatory training for those excavators. But we won't know till the end of 2025 what kind of overall effect this will have on the amount of damages that we're seeing. Next spring, we want to plan a series of educational events, one in each county, that is targeted towards construction, excavation, landscaping, and fencing companies about the state and federal laws, the tools at their disposal, the overall impact of utility damage on their safety, their budget, and their public safety as well. And many of our stakeholder companies have agreed to present safety and underground damage prevention training to include Delaware Electric Co-op, Delmarva Power and Light, Chesapeake Utilities, Tidewater, and Delmarva 811. Our local fire schools in each county have agreed to allow us to use their grounds for the training days. We're just waiting for them to get back to us with available dates. It is important that everyone understand that we all want to work safe, avoid repair cost, liability insurance cost hikes, and reduce the legal fees that can be associated with civil actions and penalties. And that brings us up to stop sharing for a second. Come on, why is this? Stop sharing.
Yeah, why is it like? Oh,
there we go. That brings us up to.
We have 5 more minutes, don't we?
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes before Jason starts. However, we would like to request that everybody go into the chat and type in your name, your title, and the company you work for, and an contact email so that we can reach out to you afterwards, and we can send you a link to the recorded version of the training so that you can share it with your coworkers if you want. Okay. And Wayne, you can wrap everything up.
Well,
do a little introduction of Jason.
All right. Is he there? Is he? Yeah.
Jason is
I see him there. All righty. Thank you again. I know this was not the most exciting part of the presentations today, but it's I hope you learn a little more about the pipeline safety program here in Delaware, and we're kind of like the little engine. What's the little engine that could, so
slowly going.
So anyway, I'd like to introduce Jason Lyon. He's the president of Delmarva 811, and he's going to be talking about Delaware business rules and best practices insofar as excavation here in Delaware.
Morning, Wayne. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. So I'm not sure, is Lorraine running the show with regards to the slide deck?
You should be able to share your screen at the bottom of your Zoom. You should be able to share it yourself.
He's sending a slide deck. So.
Okay. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes. Thank you.
Do you want me to wait until 9:15 to start, or just go ahead now?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Uh, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Lyon. I'm president of Delmarva 811. And for those of you that are not aware, uh, for many years, uh, we were known as Miss Utility of Delmarva. We have changed to Delmarva 811 to be better in line with the national message, and to keep 811 in our kind of our forefront to make sure people remember that name. And that kind of goes in line with Common Ground Alliance, which is a national best management practice organization that kind of pushes this information out to all the necessary stakeholders. Um, Additionally, I am the director of water and wastewater and engineering services at the city of Dover. So that is my day job. So today I will be providing a semi-brief message on what the rules are in Delaware. I'm gonna stay clear of the Maryland stuff. Just stay on Delaware today. Um, so of the rules and practices and best management that we can offer. Um, Wayne, Lorraine, if it's okay with you guys, I'm certainly open to any questions while I go through this slide decks to make things a little more interactive. But if you guys want to keep it at the end, that's fine too.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Do whatever you want. You're the presenter.
Okay.
That's fine with us.
So again, if anyone comes up with, you can certainly just speak up, and I'll be happy to elaborate on anything a little bit more in detail. All right. So first, just a quick disclaimer. Um, Delmarva 811 is providing an educational slide presentation, but we are not providing legal advice. So a lot of this stuff can become a little murky. Wayne alluded to it in his first presentation that there's a lot of different variables that go into play with regard to this activity. So again, if you're on this call and you are worth the facility owner or an excavator, make sure that you seek advice of your legal counsel. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. All right, so essentially what we're talking about here is safety. I think the title of today's um, the title of today's seminar is, triannual safety. So what we're trying to do here is to increase the knowledge of everyone to make sure they make safe decisions. This is obviously not a safe decision. It's quite creative, but certainly not safe. So again, the goal here is while I'm trying to provide information for everyone with regards to laws and best practices, ultimately we're trying to keep people safe so they can go home and see their loved ones every night. Okay, so Delmarva 811, as I mentioned, originally was coined as Miss Utility of Delmarva. Legally speaking, we are incorporated in the state as Utility Service Protection Center of Delmarva. So for some of you, you may have heard the term USPCD. So that is where that derivation comes from. We've been incorporated since 1974. So we're on our 50th year, which is pretty exciting. And we really have two mission statements. Uh, on the screen, we have to prevent loss of life, injuries, and property damage in the environment, and to protect the underground infrastructure in Delaware and on the eastern shore of Maryland. So that is part of our territory that we oversee. Again, today's discussion will be only about Delaware, but we do have that territory as well. So this is just a quick snapshot. Wayne had some good statistics earlier about um, how damages are happening. This is from CJ, so this is nationwide, and you can see that a fair amount of root cause damages are from no locate request, or locating practices and excavation practice. These are the three major things that we as an organization are trying to battle, to enforce and to kind of educate everyone on the ticketing process, the excavation process, and the locating. Those are the three major stakeholders that we're working with. So you can see in the last 3 years of data that's collected by CJ, this is kind of running somewhat in parallel to what Wayne's slide showed earlier with regard to the gas damages. Um, so it's important to understand that, any sort of disturbance of the ground is considered excavation. Now, there are exemptions in our law for certain activities, i.e. agricultural work or patch type paving. But for the most part, if you're putting anything in the ground, that's considered excavation by law. So if you're putting up a fence or if you're putting in a tent that needs to be staked, I can say an example. There was a very large tent that was put up on the green in front of Leg Hall here in Dover. There was a big political um, event going on, and they didn't call in a ticket, and they drove these massive tent stakes down into the ground, and it hit a water line, and it turned out to be a very big, messy issue. Um, so maybe people don't think driving a stake into the ground deserves a call in to get the utilities marked, but it is very consequential if they don't. So again, anytime you're digging into the ground, it's important to understand that you need to call in a ticket. It's a free service. We have multiple ways for you to get that information in, either via the internet. There's a mobile app that we have, or the old-fashioned way of calling either 811 or the 800 number on the screen. I should mention that our website has changed to delmarva811.com. However, if you still type in Miss Utility Delmarva, it'll redirect you to our website. So that should be good continuity in there. So what we reference with our state law is Delaware Title 26, Chapter 8, and Maryland is Title 12. Again, we're not going to talk about that today, but that is the location of the law for that state. So the board of directors of Delmarva 811 is made up of volunteers, and there's some assigned positions inside of the bylaws that go to certain utility companies in the state. Others are pretty much voted on by the membership, and the membership is facility owners and excavators could be members. Um, you can apply to be a member as a stakeholder in general. You don't have to be either of those two categories, but there is a process to go through that with our organization if you want to become a member. The reason I bring that up is since we are volunteers, we don't have the resources um, or the bandwidth to run a call center. So since the inception of this organization, we have utilized a contractor to do that. And that contractor currently is One Call Concepts. And so we manage that contract. They take care of all of what you see on the screen before you. So they are responsible for accepting all the calls or emails or or through the app, and then they would submit that information of the proposed excavation to all the facility owners in that scope of work. So if you're digging to put a pool in your backyard and you submit that ticket, it's going to go to the utilities that would be in that area. So for example, at my house in Middletown, when we put our pool in, we had Verizon, Chesapeake, Delmarva Power, Artesian, and Kent County for the sewer. So we had all of those facility owners were contacted for that one ticket. So as Wayne and Lorraine mentioned earlier, there's a influx of construction throughout the state. And you can imagine that with that influx, there is a influx of tickets that are going out. So every location is not the same. Some would have maybe one or two utilities. Others would have seven or eight. So it's a very kind of sorted affair when it comes to these tickets and how they get disseminated. I do want to make sure that everyone is understanding that, Delmarva 811, the organization, does not mark these utilities. You hear a lot of times people will say, well, Miss Utility has not marked it. And hopefully that changes to Delmarva 811, I guess. But the utility company is responsible for locating their own infrastructure. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's not done by this organization. We are strictly driven by our mission, which is to educate and to run a one call center. So keep that in mind if you have any issues. And we'll get to some slides later on how you can handle that and identify who to contact if you do have issues with it. So as an excavator, um, there's a plethora of laws. Again, just sticking with Delaware, our law currently, as it sits today, would require you to call no less than 2 days before you plan to excavate. So that would be if you're working on a Wednesday, you want to call in on a Monday. So there are situations where the tickets get delayed, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call are going through that right now. But as the law states right now, that's the way it works. In Delaware currently, um, the the work must start within 10 days of the ticket being called in, which if it does not, then an update ticket would be required. The ticket life, as long as the excavator is consistently working on the site, the scope doesn't change, and the marks are still viable, that ticket does not expire and it is good in perpetuity. But all three of those things have to happen, and oftentimes they do not. So that is when an update ticket would be required. Okay, so with regards to the excavators, there's a lot of information that is necessary to be submitted to do the work in Delaware. It's a lot of times we see the major issue in our industry is communication and getting the right people to talk to the right people when there is active construction is important. So a lot of the stuff that needs to be submitted by the excavator as well as the facility owner are in front of you. We need good phone numbers, good emails so that we can get in touch with people. There's nothing worse than getting a phone number to a clearinghouse and you've got to talk to a robot. So having good numbers is very important. So what we do with conjunction with our contractor, One Call Concepts, is we send out a yearly update to get this information from everybody, both the excavators and the facility owners, so that we do have the most up-to-date information possible to make sure that we can have the communication be as beneficial as possible. So again, I'm not going to read every one of these things. One thing I would mention is that a ticket length is a quarter mile. So if you have anything longer than that, that would require two different tickets, and we'll get into that later in this presentation. So the next few slides I want to talk about is kind of the process of how you call in a ticket and what you would see when you're using the program iTake NXT. Oops, excuse me. Let me go to the right slide. So iTake NXT is for lack of a better term, the platform that is used for excavators to call in a ticket. And this is the one that we really stress and kind of promote. There is the way to still call in over the phone, and you can talk to a customer service representative, but iTake NXT is very advantageous because it is cheaper to use for the utility company when they receive these tickets. It can be done at any time of the day. It is utilizing mapping, so you can see what you're doing instead of kind of saying it over the phone. And iTake NXT actually has the smart application to break up tickets to make the business rules work. So by that I mean if you were to put in a mile-long road of a locate for your excavation, this system will automatically break it up into four different ones. As I mentioned earlier, quarter mile would be the longest that you could have. So again, we really like to push this product. We get over 85% of all of our tickets are done through this platform. And again, it's more efficient, more functional than using the phone. So the screen that you see here is basically showing the number of tickets that you have if you are an excavator. So it has the ticket number on the left, the location, the type of ticket, and so on and so forth. So when you get through iTick NXT, when you start to put in your address for the notification, you would type it into the search bar on the top, and it would a map would be provided to you showing the location so you can verify that that looks right. And then after that, you can click. There's a fair amount of ways that you can make your excavation what we call the excavation polygon. You could click by just the parcel, and it will highlight the section that you see here with a buffer outside of the actual parcel line to give a little safety factor. And that would then provide all that information to the utilities that are within that polygon. And just for everyone's knowledge, the one call concepts has layers of every utilities area of territory. So they would provide that to One Call Concepts to say we have underground infrastructure in this area. So it would be like a GIS overlay for that layer, and it overlays with what you see in front of you now. And then that will then kick out the information to the required utility companies. So then after you provide your location, the next stop is create a job ticket. And that's what this slide is showing. It's basically showing your location, um, the response due date by, and the type of ticket. And as I mentioned earlier, these would be the specific utilities that would be notified of this excavation. So you have six utilities that would be notified. So they will all receive the ticket saying that XYZ Contracting is looking to do an excavation project at this address. You have until this date to market, and then the ticket life starts. So if anyone on this call is looking for any sort of iTick NXT training, you have new staff, or if you want just a refresher on how to use that platform, our friends at One Call Concepts provides monthly trainings. You do have to pre-register, which is on the website at the top of the screen. And there's just a lot of really good interactive trainings that are available to help everyone with this platform. So please take advantage of this. And I think, Wayne, you said this is going to be disseminated out after the fact, so that, I guess you don't need to write down all this information now, but it is certainly something that I urge anyone that is in this field, the excavating field, to take advantage of. It doesn't cost anything except your time, and it's very beneficial to make sure you know how um, to make your excavation location the most optimum it can be. One thing I will mention in light of the amount of tickets that we are receiving, and just to put things in perspective, we've had a 10% increase year to date from last year. Last year was the most tickets that our territory has ever seen. So it's definitely real. There's just a lot of federal funds coming through to help offset projects for fiber build out to rural areas. There's a lot of development going on in our state, so there's just a lot of tickets, a lot of activity. So when you are putting in your scope of ticket, it's very important not to make it any larger than it needs to be. Be as concise as possible so that you're not notifying companies that really don't need to be notified. If your project is just to plant a tree, you don't need to put in, a whole acre for that lot. Um, just keep that in mind as you are putting in your tickets. Okay, so this is just a visual of how you would calculate your ticket life. So let's say that you put your ticket in on the 29th, and that is a Monday. And technically, you should be able to start work on Thursday at 7 a.m., Thursday the 1st. but there is a potential that there could be a delay from the utility company, um, a 48-hour delay. And this calendar visualizes the fact that weekends and holidays don't count as a calendar day. So essentially, if there was a 48-hour delay, you would then be able to work on the 5th to start safely excavating on your site. The ticket expires the 13th, which would be 10 business days after the call-in date. So you have to start before that date. Now, again, we understand that there are issues out there with regard to delays of getting utilities marked out. For the purposes of this discussion, that's really just something that we got to work out communication wise. I know that there's an overload of tickets and an overload of excavation. So, um, we're trying to we're trying to keep everyone playing nice in the sandbox and having utility companies and excavators kind of communicate to make sure they can get the work done safely and effectively. But in a perfect world, this is how that would work out. Okay, so we've talked about the excavator. The operator is now what we're going to chat about a little bit. So we have different rules in our law for facility owners for what they have to do. Primarily is to respond to locate requests within 2 days and to mark those lines within a precision that is outlined on the screen. So what's called the tolerance zone is you want to mark within 18 inches of the actual location of the line. And of course, the color codes are very important, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then the facility owner then has to utilize, they have to status the ticket through the ticket check system to make sure the excavator knows that they have marked the infrastructure. So here are the colors. Not going to go through each one of them. Hopefully the folks on the call, this is nothing new to them. This is APWA uniform color code, so this is kind of nationwide use. I will say that purple, which is reclaimed water, irrigation, slurry lines, are becoming more popular. They're very, very popular in the southern states, but they are moving their way up the coast. So in this region, we're starting to see more and more of that being marked out. Okay. So this graphic kind of indicates different ownership. So one of the things that we deal with a lot with our organization is, why isn't this part of the electric line marked out? Or why isn't this part of the water line marked out? So generally speaking, there are rules for each utility type with where their ownership stops. So for example, with gas, generally it's at the meter, which is on the side of the building. With water, it's at the either the meter or the curb stop, which is at the property line. So it's very important for everyone to understand that some utility companies don't mark onto private property, and that is a business rule that they would have provided. If you have, additional buildings or structures on your site, whether it be a pool or, an outbuilding, and that's beyond the meter, then that infrastructure would need to be marked by a private locator. It would not be done by the facility owner because they may not have records of anything that was done past the meter. So just a graphic to help understand where everything kind of lies and who will mark what. So back to the excavator. And we just talked about how the utility owner is required to status the ticket. So you can see on the screen in front of you, each one of these specific utilities has put in a status, either marked up to private, and then there's some other information in there for certain utility companies. The one thing I do want to mention is that those numbers on the screen are provided to the excavator if there's any issues. So there's 3 different numbers there. And again, we do our best to obtain the best number from each utility company so that the excavator will have a perfect person to talk to and they don't have to be on hold or they don't have to go through a robot. I can't say that it always happens, but that is our goal, is to make sure people know the best way to contact these companies if there's an issue. So that information is provided to the excavator as before they actually go out into the field. And it's important that they keep this ticket on them, either digitally or paper copy, so that they know what to do if there is any issues. Your call. Okay. So this is a history of a ticket. Okay, so if you're an excavator and you go through our website and you click on ticket status, and you search for your ticket number, then you can find something called the status history. So you can see kind of an inventory of what's happened throughout the life of the ticket. It's time and date stamped, as you can see, and the status is provided on the second to right column. So if you are an excavator and you want to see like what's the holdup here or what's going on, you have this data to research and find any answers, any questions you may have. Your call is important to us. Okay, so now moving on to kind of best management practices. And later on in this slide deck, I'll talk about what we're doing with regards to future law changes. But right now, we urge all excavators to go by the way of safety first, to help themselves and the utility companies when they're excavating. So in front of you, you see a light green pedestal, which most likely is telecommunication. And you can see marks that are red and orange on the left of the screen, which indicate there's telecommunications and electric lines going that way, but there's nothing coming out of this pedestal. So as an excavator, to be prudent, they would utilize that phone number that I showed earlier to the telecommunication company and say and request what's called a discrepancy. And that would inform the utility company that maybe there was something missed in the field and to come back out and mark it. Because ultimately we're trying to protect infrastructure and people, and we don't want to have any sort of accident happen if it doesn't need to be. I realize that this would cause delays in the construction, and time is money, but we're really trying to be safe here. Again, more examples of unmarked facilities. You know, if you see something like a gas meter and there's no yellow lines coming out of it, that's probably a problem that maybe didn't get marked, and we should really be prudent and try to find that information. A fire hydrant with no blue lines coming out of it means that it's a mismark. There's nothing there, or a light pole with nothing on it. Most likely means that you are missing some electric lines that were not marked. Hi, you have reached. Not really sure why that's happening. To apologize. So when you are an excavator, we talked about the tolerance zone earlier. So currently in the Delaware law, you are to hand dig within 24 inches of the mark. So this would mean that you have to be careful when you're within 24 inches of a mark to locate the utility before you can utilize excavators or mechanical equipment. We always urge folks to start from the outside and work in, carefully digging to find that utility to make sure that they are not going to damage it with an excavator, backhoe, etc. This is an example of a close call. So you can see on the bottom of the screen, there's a faded yellow mark, which indicated the gas line. And the excavator for this specific project hand dug on the left side of that mark to locate the yellow line on the left. So theoretically, he or she could have said, okay, I found my line. I can just protect it and then I can start doing my excavation. But they went on the other side of the yellow line to the right and found another gas line. Um, when they did their 2 foot safe dig. And the good news is that no one got hurt with this. And the actual line that was active was the one on the right, not the left. So this is just an example of doing prudent excavation to the letter of the law, and a safe outcome happened. So we urge folks to always do 24 inches on both sides to make sure that everything is clear. Okay, so this is essentially, again, back to the excavators. If if the marks are damaged, which oftentimes happens on a large site where there's a lot of grading, you must call in a remark ticket. And that is on the onus of the excavator to make sure that the marks are still active and they can be seen. And also to make sure that you have a valid ticket. So if for some reason the scope of work changes, or if there's a long delay on the project, just make sure you update the ticket. So make sure that all the utility companies are aware that the project is still going on. Uh, this is a example of undercutting a utility and not supporting it. So it's the excavator's responsibility to support any uncovered utility. This was a gas line that was supposed to be shored up. In other words, vertical support for the line so that it would not bend and break. And unfortunately, it was not done, and the line kind of pinched and broke, and then we had an explosion. So just keep in mind as an excavator that you need to make sure that you shore up and you support any utility that is uncovered during your construction. Again, this is an example of when you're going and installing infrastructure, you're going to come across different lines, and just to make sure that you support them and dig around them safely and be careful when you do that. Um, and we have a note here about damage reporting, which we'll get to in a little bit. So that's Maryland law. We're going to skip that for the basis. So this safety presentation we provide to contractors, utility companies, it's kind of a all-in-one presentation. So we try to show folks that there are consequences for not doing this. So this is a little bit gory, unfortunately, but it's important to understand that, dealing with these underground utilities it's not, it's not safe sometimes. So, if you don't follow the damage prevention laws, you could have a very variable amounts of issues, and they're shown on the screen in front of you. Most importantly, there could be death or significant injuries to folks that are working in the field trying to get the job done. And then, as you think about things, there's fines, and there are civil penalties, and there are repair costs that could just be astronomical. And for anyone that is dealing with fiber or underground telecommunication, it gets very expensive very quickly. So cover yourself, cover the safety of your team members, and just follow the law. We have, most people think about underground utilities and very damaging circumstances as through electric and gas. Water can be very powerful as well. This was a 36-inch water main that was broke. I believe this was in northern Pennsylvania, and the property damage is astronomical. And you're going to have some issues with people that are parked in the parking lot, for example, or at the very least, you're going to have some massive rehabilitation work for that asphalt. This was a water line that was struck on a road to a development that only had one way in and one way out. And the issue that really came up here is this happened during Thanksgiving week, and when the road was taken up, it was impossible for people to get in and out effectively. So they had to build a temporary road through someone's property. So this could have been avoided if they would have gone through the process of getting the water line located. And instead, it was a very expensive repair and a lot of upset residents. So this picture kind of shows how much stuff can be put in the ground. This was a boring job that ripped up a whole bunch of underground infrastructure. And what we're trying to show folks here is on the picture that you see in front of you, there's two saw cut lines through the asphalt. You'll notice that there is no paint on the ground. So this is another example of, as an excavator, looking around your surroundings and seeing that if there's a trench, a saw cut trench, there's probably utilities in there. And if there was no marks on the ground, then maybe you should have called in. Well, you certainly should have called in the first time, but you would have to call in again if you didn't see any marks. These pictures go really without saying much. Um, these are the things that could happen when people touch underground high voltage lines. Very scary stuff. I'm sure if anyone has seen presentations or videos about people that are surviving these things, it's one thing for the obviously the individual that is going through this. It's very, very difficult. There's a level of depression that comes with this, a level of discontent. But I think everyone should understand that it's not just you. So if you were to get into an accident, obviously you have to deal with it, but your family members are now going to have to suffer for that. So as an owner of a utility company or as an excavation company, please take this to heart and follow the rules that are in place to protect this from happening. Um, I've heard too many stories in my 15 years on this board of this sort of thing happening and what it tears families apart, and not to mention what it happens to the person physically and mentally that's going through this. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. The Wayne had mentioned about the requirements from PHMSA to report damages. So this was already kind of touched on. The Public Service Commission is the entity that would be receiving the notification. And as Wayne mentioned, if you're a gas company, you have to report every damage. If you are non-gas, anything over 3,000 must be reported within 15 days of the issue. I think. Uh, right. So this goes over the fines. Again, Wayne mentioned that earlier, and about the notice of probable violation, warning letters, and the like. So I don't really want to repeat myself there. This is the PSC's website. So if you were to go to that website and drop down the pipeline safety, there's the spot for reported damage. And again, once you click that link, that'll open up two different avenues, one for utility owner and one for the public, or which could be used as a contractor to reference any non-compliance with the state law. So that is where you can find it. Um, again, just want to emphasize this discussion is really about safety. Boiling it down, obviously there's laws and best management practices, and there's always the give and take of getting the project done on time, getting stuff located. But ultimately, we want to keep humans safe, the environment safe, the utility and property safe. So that's our big message here. I do want to take a moment, if I can. Let's see if I can do this. So bear with me. Um, do you guys see a website that's moving on the screen?
I see a
Wayne,
static display.
you see a static. Okay, thank you, Wayne. 1 second. See if I can change this. Stop share. Share. Okay. Okay, so there should be a website that's on the screen now. Does that sound right, Wayne?
Um,
You have
I
it,
see.
Jason.
I see
Yep.
Delmar 811 website.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the website, and I wanted to just kind of point out a couple of things for resources for everybody. So again, the website's delmarva811.com. And on this website, there's a in the middle on the left, there's a button that says Delmarva 811 Excavator Training and Education. This is a free service that we provide. It's a self-paced, graded um, kind of an evaluation broken into multiple chapters. So if you are a utility company or a, a regulatory agency or an excavator and you want to have new folks learn about the law and how it impacts all the stakeholders, that is a great resource for you to use. Our team worked pretty hard on this, and with the help of One Call Concepts to put this together. All you need to do is enroll with an email address, and then at the end of your training, you will get a score, which you can provide to your boss or to just keep on your file, um, saying that you went through the program and learned what what the rules and procedures are. Also on this website, you'll see on the right there's iTick NXT. So that's what we talked about earlier. That's how you would start the process. And then there's something on the right called online dashboards, which I'm going to click on real quick. So online dashboards is a kind of a real-time view of how the ticketing is being dispersed in the area. So as that loads, bear with me. So you can see on this screen the number of tickets that were called in on December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's when they were processed. And then you'll see on the next chart when those tickets are due. And then you can see a lot more detail about the counties that were called in and the percentages therein. The reason this is kind of a good feature is it provides the excavator a snapshot of where big the big days of tickets that are due are, and you could kind of adjust your schedule based on whether or not you want that to be on a day that's not as heavy for locators to get things done. Additionally, if you were to click on the numeral 2 on the left, this provides you with more of a yearly look, so you can see monthly how many tickets are being processed through our call center, and also how many the specific locations in which county. So these are all just good data that can be utilized in a lot of different ways, and we want to make sure people are aware of it as another tool in the toolbox. I think that's all I really wanted to touch on, Wayne and Lorraine. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the group.
Yeah, you got another 15, 20 minutes. Well, I just want to say that I think we learned that also instead of everybody putting in their tickets on a Monday, we've learned that maybe they should try putting it in on I think a Wednesday or a Thursday.
Yep.
Might be a better way to put them in when they're a little less busy. That's what we've come to understand.
Yeah, it does. It does help out the excavator that regard. I will say that there are states out there that are practicing a process that the excavator can choose which day they want to start their excavation based on the window of that ticket life. So, for example, in Maryland, if you put your ticket in on Monday, the 2nd of December, but you know you're not going to do the work until maybe December 13th or 17th, then they, as long as that fits within that 12 business days, then that gives the locator a better opportunity to manage their workload. Um, because if you just put it in on the second, the assumption by the locator is that they're going to start working in 2 days. So again, just more resources to try to make this situation more palatable for everybody. Again, I can't emphasize enough, the number of tickets is just astronomical. And for utility companies to train and hire locators, it doesn't just happen at a flip of the light switch. So um, just something that we see a lot of. I did not um, I didn't kind of go into the future law change yet, Wayne. I just want to see if there's any questions before I dive into that. So if I'm not hearing any, I can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, hey, and you got plenty of time, so you don't have to rush.
Yeah,
We got like 15 minutes, if actually, we're like 20 minutes.
yeah. Okay, let me close this out. Go back to.
Did you touch on the law changes that you're working on?
That's what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoops. That's not. Okay. Can you guys see a screenshot of a letter?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so I touched on this a little bit earlier. The board of directors has been working on updating the law in the state of Delaware. We started doing this process many years ago, um, and not to get too deep in the details, but we've gotten a law change pushed up to the governor's office probably 10 years ago, and at that time it was kind of voted down and said it doesn't need to be done this way, and so we went back to the drawing board. Then, as Wayne alluded to earlier, PHMSA got involved, saying that you need to get something done now, and with regard to enforcement, and the PSC took the reins on that, and the law change was kind of put on the back burner. But now we finally have our ducks in a row. The enforcement piece has been instituted through law. And now we just want to basically make a couple of change. Well, there's more than a couple, but there's several changes that need to be made to our law to bring things up to date. The last time that the law was substantially changed was in 1994. And so a lot of different factors have come up in those 30 years, i.e. technology. There's different ways to look at the expiration of tickets. So we have, as a board, we work together with stakeholders um, to kind of put together a law that would be as equitable as possible for both sides of the stakeholders. And so that law was disseminated in the summer, the draft law, and we had requested any comments to be submitted by October. We've received quite a few comments, which is great. We've met with some of the contractor associations in Delaware to make sure that, we're getting buy-in. The last thing we want to do is have a law that's provided that we don't have consensus on, because that's generally how things get killed. So we've met with quite a few stakeholders, heard their concerns, and we have now readjusted the proposed law. I'm not going to read all the stuff that's on the screen. You guys certainly handle that. Um, but a major thing that we're trying to change is the ticket life, because in Delaware, as I mentioned earlier, there's not technically an expiration date on that, which becomes kind of an unsafe practice, and it leads to confusion um, for the excavating community as well as the locating community. So we're trying to button that up, trying to get a little bit more up to date on the technical terms within our law, and um, basically provide some accountability if there is any issue with a marking in the field, so the contractor doesn't have to kind of wait for a really long time. We're trying to make sure everything gets buttoned up, and there's some substance to the law instead of it being so kind of ambiguous, for lack of a better term. So we have the proposed law on our website. So you can take a look at that. Again, the kind of the period of getting comments in is over, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do that again. Based on the amount of comments that we had, our board is going to reevaluate that and potentially put out another comment period. It's again, we really want to make sure we go to the state legislature with a consensus. So, um, any questions on that? Anything I could help clear up?
Do you have a timeline goal to get this completed? Because I know getting things through the legislature is a process.
Sure, good question. Our goal is to put this in front of our sponsor in the first quarter of next year. Now, I don't know where it's going to go from there. There could be a lot of discussion on it. As everyone knows, there's going to be a new governor in Delaware with new secretaries and probably definitely some new agendas. So I'm not sure where that's all going to line up. Not exactly sure if our sponsor will still be in the seat that they're in. So yeah, that's the goal is hopefully get it probably um, pass through in the first quarter, maybe before the summer break, and then there would be a lag with regard to when it would be enforced. But that's our timeline at this point.
Once the new legislation is in process, how do you think that will affect your turnaround times for ticket completions for the excavators?
Well, I think ultimately the way that I would say that that would be improved is by enforcement, right? So if if the locating community were not to follow the new guideline, well, not guidelines, but the new law as it's proposed to be written, then the only recourse would be if the contractors would say, you guys aren't following the rules, submit a request through the Public Service Commission saying that they aren't following the law. And maybe that would then start the the action to improve. Um, but again, yeah, everything that we're putting in this law is hoping to make the situation better on both sides of the token. So I really hope it will. I don't want to sound naive, but certainly try to be optimistic on that.
Hey, Jason, I know I've talked to you about it, but my executive director said if all these changes are going to go way off, he at least wants to, if he has to, the PSC can put in the legislative change for the ticket expiration.
Yeah,
Talked
I think
about that,
that's the
so
minimum. Yeah,
that,
that I think we're
and
one
we
of
can
the
at
only
least
states
get
that has that.
we can at least get that done if this drags on. We can try to get that done.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it just leads to too much confusion with regard to when the ticket's still good. So we need to clear that up for sure.
Any questions, anybody? Any questions on my little talk? Anyway, I want to go back to the agenda, and we're going to have a break, and that's going to end at 10:30. So it's you're going to have a longer break, so you can hit the head and make your phone calls and check your email. And at 10:30, we're going to have Scott Marshall, and he's going to be an hour and a half. And I tell you, he's going to put on a bang up presentation. As I said, I saw him talking this subject matter out of Oklahoma City at the event training class that was out there. He was a co-instructor. Very, very good, and I think it'll be impactful because I've seen his talk. So I tell everybody to just hang in there and continue watching, starting at 10:30, and you won't be disappointed. And okay,
Thanks,
any
Wayne.
questions?
Hey,
And
Wayne.
Jason, thank you very much for this slide deck, putting that together and talking. This is very important stuff that people in Delaware need to know and understand.
My pleasure.
Wayne and Jason, this is Tucker Bullock with Easton Utilities. Good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to say, Jason, thank you for this information. I think it's great information to share. The monthly meetings that 811 holds around Delmarva, those are public meetings, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, they're public.
And yeah, so I would put a plug in for anybody who's interested in knowing more or getting involved more with the group's efforts to prevent damages to utilities. Those monthly meetings are a great way to get involved, get contacts, meet people from different utilities. There's a lot of great efforts in those rooms and during those meetings. And I will say, Jason runs a fantastic meeting. So even if you can't join in person, which I highly would recommend, the virtual option, you'll find value from it. And Susan Sullivan with One Call Concepts that does the training. She does a great job. And the meetings are so good that we've had trouble with frequent damagers to our gas lines, and we have required them to come to one of those meetings just to get more involved with the damage prevention aspect and more education out there, because it is so important to prevent these damages and injuries. And coming from someone who was with a gas company, that because of a third party damage, we lost 2 lives. And it's just not necessary when practices are followed, best practices are followed. And we can do that in a collaborative manner. So I just throw that out there that those monthly meetings are a great way to get involved, and I would invite anybody to come by and join us.
Appreciate that, Tucker.
Hey, thank you, Tucker. And hey, listen, thanks for the idea about requiring someone to go to a Delmarva. Well, I mean, I never thought about that. Thought about, we're now adding the mandatory training in some of the consent agreements, but I think that going to a meeting is an excellent idea. Thank you for that.
And good morning, and thank you to the Delaware Public Service Commission and Wayne for the invite to speak today at this pipeline safety seminar. Well, Wayne's a great colleague in pipeline safety, and one thing that Wayne and I have discussed often is that Delaware has been very fortunate to not have had a reportable pipeline incident for a very long time. So I think it's really important to kind of go over that how pipeline incidents themselves occur and how they're not necessarily some magnificent power that's just drawing into causing these incidents. It's a lot of factors that come into play. And my hope is going through sort of a case study, which I'll go over in my presentation, will help kind of show and illustrate how certain sets of events and timing come together. But before I dive into the presentation, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, as I'm speaking at the Delaware Pipeline Safety Conference, and I acknowledge I might be fairly unknown. My name is Scott Marshall. I am the Deputy Director for the State Corporation Commission of Virginia's Division of Utility and Railroad Safety. And in that role, I lead our gas and hazardous liquid pipeline safety programs, our underground utility damage prevention program, and our data analytics. I've been with the commission for about 12 years. And I also have 27 years of fire and emergency services management experience. I also serve as a certified fire and explosion investigator. And so I think I have a unique synergy at the commission where when we're talking about incidents and failures, I can bring a lot of that experience to bear. So as we get started, as I was saying, that going through this case study, I really hope will illustrate how incidents kind of occur through sometimes a series of unrelated events. If you're familiar with the American Petroleum Institute's recommended practice 1173 for pipeline safety management systems, it talks about a theory of target barrier hazard analysis. And if you're not familiar or haven't read that brief recommended practice, I really do encourage it. And in your mind's eye, if we are imagining a target that we want to protect, in our industry, we're talking about pipelines. And we place barriers to harm to those pipelines in the sense of regulations, procedures, inspections, patrolling, certain preventative actions. And each of those, if you can imagine in your mind's eye, as a slice of Swiss cheese, each one of them being a barrier protecting our target, the pipeline, from harm. And oftentimes, those barriers will have, as Swiss cheese does, has holes in them, weaknesses. And every so often, all of those barriers and all of those weaknesses, those holes in those layers of Swiss cheese align to allow something to happen. So in the presentation, you'll see an example of how some of those barriers occur aligned during a planned normal operation, a blue sky sort of day, regular pipeline operations, something that pipeline operators perform every day and regulators are out there inspecting quite often alongside of them. It's my hope in sharing this incident will spark some dialogue in your organizations about your level of preparedness for a possible incident occurring. Perhaps maybe also increasing that dialogue. Are you training and preparing for the inevitable that at some point in time, some sort of event, whether it's a reportable event or not, it may occur, and hopefully bringing back some lessons learned from this incident. With that being said, let's kind of set the stage. As I mentioned, I am from the State Corporation Commission of Virginia, so we're setting the stage. Not that long ago, in a galaxy not that far away, we are in the Springfield, Virginia area. And as you can see, this is in very close proximity to the nation's capital area. Roughly, Springfield, Virginia is approximately 14 miles away from PHMSA headquarters at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. And so with that, local news oftentimes is national news. We have a very large urban sprawl and metropolitan area, as you can see highlighted in this map. So to set the timing of this event and presentation, let's also talk about, we're winding the clock back a little bit. It's February 3rd, 2021. And if you don't recall, unless you're in this picture, you probably don't remember that exact moment, but Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg was being sworn in by Vice President Kamala Harris. And that's really notable because the Secretary of Transportation is over top of the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, amongst many other things, which promulgate and inspect pipeline operators and empower state partner agencies to also take on a significant portion of those inspection duties at the state level. So as Secretary Buttigieg is being sworn in, his first day in office, almost simultaneous to when this picture is taken, this is the type of headlines that are occurring across the Springfield metropolitan area. So we're talking about Northern Virginia. A gas leak is being sparked and ignites. Multiple gas workers are injured. We have television helicopters. We have the local news is becoming the national news. This is actually what is being shared on multiple national news outlets, NBC, Fox, CBS, ABC. It's all over. And as you can imagine, this is already becoming quite the significant incident. And rather than playing a number of videos, I think I'll let this just sit here to allow you to see that we are in a mode of operations at this point in time where something bad has dramatically happened. This wasn't a fire in which the gas company was responding to. This was a fire or something occurred during normal planned operations. And we'll dive through this and walk through the sequence of events and those various layers of Swiss cheese, those barriers that I talked about in target barrier hazard analysis that leads to this. But as we sit here and look at this picture, I would like for pipeline operators and the regulators in the room to stop and think that this is not that uncommon of a picture. We have crew trucks, we have mini excavators, we have a bell hole or a pothole in the middle of the road. There's clearly work that's being done in and along this pipeline. And to give you another perspective, the pipeline safety staff of the commission received a notification, not necessarily from the pipeline operator, but from the responding Fairfax County Fire Department, in which says, "Hey, we are responding to a major pipeline incident, and we have multiple people injured, and we need your assistance in helping us with the pipeline operator." The pipeline operator almost simultaneously also reports to the commission that we have a significant incident. We are not aware of, and I'm paraphrasing here, much of the details other than we had two crews out there and something really bad has happened. The supervisor is the only one we're able to get a hold of, and he's calling for a section shutdown. Initial reports are from the pipeline operator that at least 3 people are severely injured. The fire department is reporting 7 people are injured. The fire department is classifying their response as significant, and the operator sending additional personnel to the scene. So as we respond to the scene as well to launch our investigation, we don't have much information. In incidents, if for the purpose of kind of sharing some experience for those who have not had to manage one recently, it's not uncommon to have conflicting information or preliminary information that does not necessarily align with each other, because it's a very dynamic situation. As you can see in these pictures, there's an imminent life safety issue that the fire department's trying to work with the pipeline operator to remedy. And that's the main focus, is that to protect further injury first and then protect property second. It's something that's codified in the pipeline safety regulations. And as you can see here, we have multiple agencies, multiple entities. We even have the power company assisting the the fire department, the pipeline operator. What we do know at this point in time, as staff of the commission is arriving, is that there is only one excavation, that 2 crews for the pipeline operator were present for, quote, planned work. We do not know what that planned work was. And we do know, once we have arrived on scene, we have verified that all of those crew members are injured and none are available to be interviewed. The supervisor's present, but he is so shooken up he cannot be interviewed because the injuries are that significant. Gas is actively escaping. It is uncontrolled, and it hasn't ignited. And as you can see in the last number of slides, that there's a 50-foot tall torch fire that's omnipresent. So we are still very much in the emergency mode of operations, and we as a regulator are trying to wrap our hands around this just as much as the pipeline operator and the emergency services personnel. And when we start talking about incidents, and it is very fortunate that there have not been many recent incidents, And we are a state that also too enjoys a low number of incidents that occur. I think it's important to let these types of pictures sit in for a moment. This PPE was worn by someone's son, someone's father, someone's mother, sister, brother. They went to work that day expecting that they were going to go home the same way they went to work that day. Unfortunately, none of the people that wore this PPE from the pipeline operator that day went home the same person that they went to work for that day. Gas continues to burn at this point in time with no reduction or stoppage of gas flow that's notable at this point in time. The pipeline is a two-way fed pipeline. It's a 6-inch Adelaide pipeline with an MAOP of approximately 90 psi. Its operating pressure is near 60 psi. And as you note in this picture, as we walk through this case study, you'll note that there is a single excavation point only in this roadway. Additional crews are responding from the pipeline operator to attempt to stop or stymie the gas flow of the incident. And as you know, as pipeline operators in the audience today, that when we have an ignition of gas, the only way to extinguish that fire is to remove the product that is on fire. The eastern excavations to attempt to squeeze off are slowed by the gas company's contract locator who had mismarked the main in response to the emergency. So the operator simultaneously is digging both east and west of this fire that we see here on this slide. That eastern trench that they're digging to access the squeeze off was mislocated. So they spent an enormous amount of time in frozen soil to dig down to not find the main and had to repeat that work. So we start thinking about, we don't know what happened or the sequence of events that led to this, but we do appreciate there are other things that are going wrong already. Simultaneous to the attempt to squeeze off the two-way feed, we have this mismark. And I would ask, our pipeline operators in the room and our regulators in the room, what other questions might you have of a pipeline operator should a similar event like this happen? We're working to squeeze off, but what other actions could they take? In this instance, critical valves are an opportunity, right? The regulations allow the operators to identify the number of critical valves needed to protect or mitigate an emergency, paraphrasing the regulation there. So it's up to the operator to determine how many critical valves they have in their system. And as an operator and a regulator, we both have a vested interest in understanding exactly what happened. So all of the damaged crew trucks and all the damaged equipment was actually recovered by a towing company and stored in their impound lot. And staff of the commission and the operator worked together to inventory what was on those trucks and compare what was on those trucks to what should have been on those trucks. That would give us an idea what, if anything, was missing from the trucks and probably tell a little bit of the story of what was the crew actually doing at or near the time of the incident. What we know at this point in time during our investigation as we work through our case study is that we now have a lot more records available to us. We're not in the immediate life safety mode. We're not in the initial response to recovery. We're not we've recovered our perishable evidence. We are also documenting all of our steps and actions. We've also had a chance to review a lot of records. What we do know now is this was an early 1980s vintage Adelaide, Maine, pressures as described before. Installations show that it was installed sometime in the 1980s approximately. It was stick-built pipe. The company had a qualified joining procedure. The crew was certified at the time of installation to perform these, and these were construction stick-built pipes. So if anyone's ever seen or actually even performed joining stick-built pipes in open trench, that's a lot of manual labor. Although hydraulic butt fusion was approved by the company and a procedure existed and it was qualified, it was not widely used. In fact, it had not actually been deployed at the time of the installation. Therefore, we knew that this particular pipe that was at the top of a hill was stick built, uh, typical stick built lengths. It was open cut, and yeah, we have an interest to see if that pipeline contractor is still in business. Maybe we can interview the original folks that installed this. And unfortunately, none of them are available. They're no longer with us. The construction company is no longer with us either. Repair crew is still hospitalized. But the company can confirm they were there to cut out a temporary 30-day clamp on this plastic pipe. The precise incident sequence of the events leading up to the fire still somewhat remain unclear, but a general picture is coming into focus for us. We had a leak. We know we have a 1980s vintage Adelaide main. There was some sort of leak. Someone prior to these two crews came out. They put a leak clamp on it. This crew's job was to go out there and cut that leak out. And then something happened, right? So this is a great example of collecting evidence that even as a pipeline operator, you may not, or a pipeline safety regulator might not think that you might want to ask your pipeline operator to. We want to look at that crew truck. We want to look at the equipment. What equipment's missing? What supplies are missing? We can't interview our crew. That will paint that picture. This operator has, an incident investigation procedure as required. They have a process to store and handle and collect a lot of evidence, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be something. Um, it can be something as simple as this. It's just a warehouse that's secured with some chain link fencing. It has some tarping, and you can see it doesn't have to be CSI Miami. This is a warehouse that does have extra items in it that are not evidence, but it's secured and there's a log and there's only one person that has a key. He doesn't let anyone in or out without that key. And so you can start seeing we have pipe fixtures, the things that you can see that was collected during the actual incident are now here. And now after having more of the information come into focus, we have the opportunity to review that and any types of records of the chain of custody. I want to just let this sit here again. Someone was wearing this uniform and this fire retardant clothing and this breathing apparatus and this hard hat. All speaking that this person was well aware of the hazards of the product that they work with, and they were prepared to follow procedures because otherwise they wouldn't have been wearing this. And you can also see the significance of the injuries that fire retardant clothing still failed to protect this person. So we're looking at some of that pipe. Again, I drew that attention to, we had a piece of pipe that had looked like it was cut, and we're now seeing this is certainly, it looks like a fusion, using tools to document the depth and length and diameter of pipe. We can see that, again, this is stick-built pipe, a typical length. It's unusual to have a fusion about 11 inches from the end of the pipe. And then after that fusion, there's another fusion. So I have some investigative inquiry and questions for our operator. Here's an example of documenting the actual defect that I showed you in that mud slurry, right? A lot of speculation. Again, we can start creating hypotheses and start thinking about what could have occurred to the pipe, but I'm not a material scientist. I need someone that's qualified to be able to look at this piece of pipe and tell me, was that thinning of the pipe wall due to heat impingement? Or is that some type of material failure? I can say that this appears to be some sort of metal deposit on the pipe, but I can't tell you what type of metal. I suspect it may be slothed off aluminum from the shoring box. Here we see another Smith-Blair clamp. And these are the two pipe segments side by side. There is a value in also using analogs. So ask the operator. We inventoried your truck, and these are what we're seeing in the evidence locker. What type of clamps are approved or in use on your pipeline system for the work that this crew was doing? And so this is a picture documenting that Smith-Blair type clamp and another type of clamp that the operator was using at that point in time. All that being said, we, the regulator and the operator, need to know more information about exactly what caused the incident still. We need to evaluate the material, the fusions. So the operator selected a laboratory. It's thoroughly packaged, methodically packaged and transported and cataloged. This is pictures from that laboratory examination where the material is carefully unpackaged and examined and documented yet again. We can see the segment of pipe and an Adelaide historical legacy pipe. We also see some defects in the pipe. This is a 1/2 inch ratchet that's fused and melted into the pipe. We see a lot of heat impingement and damage to the pipe. We can see some markings consistent with some of the analog that we saw with the sleeving material inside, the gasketing material inside that Smith-Blair. Prior to any examination, whether it's plastic, forensic, metallurgical, or in-house or outside of house, it really should have a dialogue, operator, regulator, and interested parties to establish some sort of examination protocol. How will you receive the pipeline segments or evidence? From that, what will be the various cataloging and examination, NDT testing, and then DT testing, destructive testing and non-destructive testing. Because after all, you want to make sure you do all your non-destructive testing. And then you want to do your destructive. What are the objectives? Make sure that each party is, informed. This is what the plans are and how we're going to examine this. We're going to do all this NDT testing, and then we're going to destructively test this portion. Here's an example of packaging and documentation. Again, focusing on that 1/2 inch ratchet. Cleaning is part of that, right? So this is after the pipe is gently cleaned to show more of the defects of the pipe. And these sawhorses are leveled and they're shot with a laser level, and you can see that there's a defect or a hump in this pipe. Again, I'm not a material scientist, but as an investigator, my question is this defect part of the heat impingement and the plastic softening? I would say that more than likely, but that's a question to have to the material scientists and the engineers conducting the forensic examination, which in fact it was. And to illustrate that, we are taking a lot of documentation of photographic evidence of these pieces of pipe, but we're not trying to fit them back together. There's a process to do that. We don't want to damage the fractured ends or any of these artifacts that are on the pipeline. And so what we're using, or the operator's contractor was using, is a 3D scanning photographic technology. We have our two segments of pipeline. They're positioned approximately in relation to each other. You see engineering scale. And through the power of selecting the right laboratory, if you need laboratory analysis as an operator, as a regulator, you're able to actually reassemble that pipeline with those types of tools in the virtual space. So drawing your attention here, again, stick-built pipe at the top of a hill, you're starting to see more and more of those barriers aligning, aren't you? We have 2 pups of pipe. We have 3 fusions. The failed fusion that looked like it was actually a cut section of pipe is in the center at the top of the apex of that hill. We have an old tapping tee and what looked to be a new tapping tee, and we can see how they all interplay and interact with each other. Again, you can see metal deposits. Those were analyzed, other defects and imprints that were in the pipeline, the elements of the squeeze off that was indicative of it being deployed and moving as the pipe thinned and softened. And more photographic evidence of the electrofusion tapping tee. We can see the coil there. And again, material analysis would later verify this is a medium density modern tapping tee. And again, using engineering scales to show, hey, how much mass loss was there? Close up, high resolution photography of the actual fusion. A conversation that the operator and the regulator both had, we both shared. We wanted to know, was this a cold fusion? Was this a bad fusion? And something happened to it, right? So we can use the operator's contractor use scanning electron microscopy and an X-ray spectroscopy high resolution image of both the fracture points and of this tapping tee. And through that, again, we find the probable cause, the root cause, by examining thoroughly documented evidence that was collected the night of the incident. This is beyond a doubt. This is proof that in the 1980s, the crew made a joint that by all appearances likely passed a visual pass. But because they were making two pups of pipe fit the trench line at the top of a hill, they lacked adequate pressure time or facing time of the two melted fusion joints and made a cold fusion joint as exhibited by the cracking in the fused material. So in the 1980s, someone didn't do a good joint. It survived all the way to the 2000s, 2023, 2024. And the operator got a leak call. That leak was on this fusion. A decision was made at that point in time to put a clamp on top of a fusion, which at that point in time was allowed by their procedures. But I have never been able to find through the course of this investigation or since a clamp that is rated and approved for clamping over top of a fusion. It's just like a bad weld. It should be cut out, and that's how you fix it. However, the crew came back and was going to make that cutout and bypass. So here's our probable cause of our incident, and we have proof, right? Because we used a scientific method and we were methodical and we documented. But as a question, as every operator I'm sure has in the room and every regulator, how many more of these joints did this crew make like that? They've all unfortunately passed away. The contractor is out of business. The question then becomes, as the regulator, operator, how many more joints have you had that had leaks? How many 30-day clamps do you have? And how do we make sure that this crew knew how to make good joints? That there was a qualified jointing procedure that should have resulted in a gas-tight joint. Well, we have a bunch of analogs because we had those other two pups and we collected other pipe from that incident scene. We're going to cut out the joints that had not failed, even through the course of the fire. And we're going to do a qualification test to the standard in which was in place at the time when these were made. And as you can see here, collecting all the strapping around the entire O-clock position, cut out of the entire pipe, it looks like visual passes, destructively passes. And then asking for those data sets brings us back to the conclusion of wrapping up a thorough probable cause incident investigation. A 1988 fusion was made that did not apply enough force or duration to create a cold fusion. That fusion likely would have passed visual inspections, but still was not a good fusion because they were trying to force the pipe to the ditch line rather than cutting a deeper ditch line or creating a bypass around the top of that apex of the hill. There are some contributing factors, right? We looked at the trench line, the topography versus the pipeline, the practice of having a clamp over top of a leaking fusion. That actual clamp is not designed for that, nor is it stamped with a standard that says it can be applied in that manner. There was generally a poor work plan that day. And we can talk a little bit more offline if you like about some of the decisions that were made. But during the interviews, both crew foremen acknowledged that they should have had, as the company's policy and practice and procedures say, you have to have 3 separate excavations. The hole that you're working in on a two-way feed, and you have to have a separate excavation for where you're going to squeeze off. They should have had 3 excavation points. Interviews with witnesses and the crews later on, thankfully they all recovered, all corroborate this, that there was a sequence of events that the crew opened up the trench line, did not open the trench line up enough for the initial shoring box. One of the crew foremen saw that the actual box itself was applying pressure to the pipe. They pulled the box back out, opened the trench line, put the box back in over top of that leaking butt fusion that was clamped. Later, the 2 crew foremen would again get into the trench line per their own statements, and one of them slipped, and when he fell on the cold fusion joint that was leaking and secured with a clamp. That resulted in a full loss of containment and an actual blowing gas situation. No ignition. They all evacuated the trench line. The crew then makes another decision, having not followed the procedures to have 2 separate trench lines securing the gas with 2 squeeze-offs before they go into the leaking area. They made another decision to then try to work in blowing gas to then, pardon the dogs in the background, to work and try to resolve this with the blowing gas situation, which was against their procedures. There were some other probable violations that did not contribute to the probable cause of the incident. We had someone that made an unqualified modern fusion, and we had some incident command shortcomings, and there was some interactions between the company and the fire department that did not go very well, that required us to act as the intermediary. There was the failure to prioritize 617 actions, and this incident predated the regulatory change. But the conversations on site, we were able to work through that shortcoming on site to protect that evidence, to allow the operator and staff to achieve a thorough and complete investigation. And also, always keep in mind, there's a Part 199, drug and alcohol testing, when you have reasonable belief or possibility that you need to rule that out during an incident and accident. So those are some of the backgrounds. And I know that's been a long presentation of 34 slides, but I hope that you find that walking through this has helped you kind of start generating questions about what each of your organizations do, both as a pipeline operator, as a regulator, to work through an incident and have those questions in the back of your mind. Are you prepared? Have you trained? And what are your processes and procedures to delineate the expectations of your staff when you're on site of an incident? I'd love to turn it over to any questions or comments you might have.
Great presentation. Appreciate that, Scott.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Richard. Well, my contact information is in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Again, thank you to the Delaware Public Service Commission and Wayne for the invite. And I wish you a great rest of your conference. Thanks so much, everyone.
The 22 to 23, the trend line has gone up over time. So I'll be anxious to see what 24 yields us. But, again, as I said, we always have talked about, well, our damages per thousand have trended down over time. And while that's true, we have to ask ourselves why it's trended down over time. And the answer is not because we've reduced damages. The answer is because we've increased the generation of one-call tickets. And that drives up the denominator. Even though the numerator increases, the denominator increases more, and therefore it gives what I call a disproportionate negative or disproportionate positive optic on our state of the union when it comes to excavation safety. So, again, for those of you who preach this message, keep that in mind and feel free to use those slides. So this is an example, and this is the state of Florida. This all stems from an article that the CEO of the Common Ground Alliance wrote a little better than, well, about a year and a half ago now. And it talked about this incredible growth of infrastructure in the state of Florida, which, by the way, is where I live. So, I am, talking about my own backyard. And at the end of calendar year 2020, the state recorded nearly 24,000 excavation damages throughout the state. And that's all utilities. That's obviously more than what we in the gas and liquid world are used to, but that's statewide, all utilities. And again, the CGA article, the data that they acquired, put 76%, 3/4 of the damages in one of those following three categories: not calling 811, utilities not accurately marking their facilities, and the failure to maintain adequate clearance. Also in that article, and I got to keep underscoring that because this isn't a PHMSA generated thing. This was a CGA generated article. 60% of the damages of those three listed above were from professional excavators. That their full-time job is involving excavation. And 60% of those from those professional contractors for not calling 811. And that should make us scratch our head a little bit. Why is it that it's that high? So when we look at that same slide and we look at it from, again, element 7, effective damage prevention program, the enforcement, Mr. Damage Prevention Enforcement, because that's how we hold people accountable. And we look at 76% of those, all of those are violations of Florida's one-call law. And I suspect, in fact, I'm pretty sure they are violations of every state's one-call law, using 811, operators marking their facilities and the like. So 76% of that 24,000 is 18,240 violations of the Florida State one-call law just for calendar year 2022. And you can see below that 14,000+ of those are from professionals, that this is what they do professionally. 14,400 violations of their one-call law. You go to the gray box, state of Florida in 2022 had 34 enforcement cases for those 18,000 damages. And I'll highlight again, when we talk about, the damages, 24,000 damages, how many violations of the law occurred if there were 24,000 damages? Because not all violations of the law led to a damage. So if they had 24 that led to a damage, you really got to scratch your head and wonder how many violations there might have been. And I have no way to know. Your guess is as good as mine. But in this bottom bullet here, that is a enforcement to damage ratio of 0.19%. And to put this in contrast, and here's another factoid that might make you go, oh, and you look at this compared to motor vehicle accidents, traffic crashes, traffic tickets, speeding, red lights, etc. Roughly, and I mean roughly, national average is 7.7 traffic citations for every one traffic crash. And so you go, wait a second, did you get your number right? 7.7 traffic tickets for every one traffic crash, in contrast to what you see here on this screen, 0.19 enforcement cases, if you will, tickets to every one excavation damage. And why such a drastic difference? Well, because as we all know, we can get a traffic ticket without having to crash, right? Wayne probably knows better than most, right? That's a joke, but you get pulled over for speeding or running a light or stop sign or whatever. There's no crash, but you got a ticket. So that's the driving reason you get held accountable for the violation, regardless of whether or not you were involved in a traffic crash. We don't even see that. We hardly ever see that in the excavation safety world. There has to be a damage for anything to trigger in the first place when it comes to holding, the aggrieved party accountable. All right, so I mentioned to you, we talked about utilizing the integrity management, and what the previous couple of slides have shown is that in effective enforcement, is designed as a tool. It's simply a tool to, mitigate excavation threats and mitigate excavation damage. And it has been wholly ineffective in over time since the beginning of this excavation safety effort, going back 20 years. Enforcement has not been effective. That's just a reality. And so I was challenged by my executive leadership to see what we could do to try to, if you will, work through the lack of enforcement, the lack of effective enforcement. And it occurred to me that every one of you that's regulated by way of the Pipeline Safety Act, you are held accountable to a lot of other things that deal with excavation safety. And I put that in this, I think it's a Venn diagram, if I remember correctly. But when you look at all of these particular topics that you are held to by way of regulation, all of these can address excavation damage and excavation safety. And in my simple-minded world, integrity management, or DIMP as highlighted here, is really the hub of what we do for safety. It's identifying the threat and mitigating those threats. That's in my simplest perspective with my lenses on it. It's that. And every one of you on this call knows how all of these different regulatory factors impact excavation safety, but they don't for the unregulated. So, and this is basically the DIMP program, and all of you know this. And then I was just saying, I put this up here just to go, in my mind, it's about threats, mitigation, and measurement. What are my threats? How am I mitigating them? And how do I measure whether or not it's been successful? And so in early 2023, we started a pilot, and we did something that was very, very unique in the history of the regulatory, or the regulator and regulated dynamic. And that is PHMSA and myself sat down with the state partner, which would be the Wayne Ericssons of the country. And we sat down with individual operators, and we basically, the three entities sat around a table, and we identified, what their metrics were, what their problems were, what were their threats. And then when we agreed on what their threats were, we then let the operator identify what are your mitigations going to be. And that's the bullet number 3, is we establish performance expectations under the umbrella of DIMP. And then the fourth one, and this is the part, and again, I would encourage you to take a hard look at these things, because we're going to be rolling this out ultimately to everybody. But again, the three entities sat around the table, we established threats, they established a mitigation, the operator established a mitigation. And then the fourth bullet was, we would then ask, what will you do towards the mitigation you just identified in the next 90 days? And this is very unusual. I know, those of you who deal with this go, whoa, 90 days, that's, 3 months. And the answer is yes, that's what we did. You identified a mitigation of whatever that may be, and we're not going to come back in 5 years or even 1 year and ask you where you are in that. We're going to come back in 3 months. So make a commitment today, what you will have accomplished towards this mitigation in the next 3 months. And it might be as simple as, we're going to draft a letter of intent. We're going to draft a policy. We're going to, any number of things. Okay. And then in 90 days, when we check in with you, if you haven't accomplished what you have committed to, then you have failed to mitigate a threat under your DIMP. And that's the tie back to DIMP, and that's the tie back to operator accountability. And again, if you are involved in the DIMP program, I probably have your attention right now. And this was the pain point. This cadence of accountability, it has kept it, and it is keeping the movement forward. It's keeping it in motion and a forward motion progress. So I'll take a quick breather there. Any questions? All right. So in the pilot year of 2023, I went out to 4 different states, 5 different operators, and we picked very large operators on purpose because our goal was to utilize this effort to reduce excavation damage. And you can see there from this page, these operators are some big players. And you can see at the end of 2023, the difference that it had, the impact that this program had. Now, listen, I can't take credit for all of this, this success here, but it played a part in it. And you see some pretty significant improvements in the reduction of excavation damages. You can see that on this chart, but overall, collectively, the pilot showed a 12.3% drop in just excavation damages. I've gotten away from the damage per thousand metric, but just because at the end of the day, it's all about reducing damages. And we dropped in these 4 states, 5 pilot operators, over 2,000 excavation damages. So that really raised a couple eyebrows at the executive level within PHMSA and even the Department of Transportation. This particular slide, this metric has gone up to the Secretary's office and is now a metric that is measured. So because 2023 was such a success, we continued it into 2024. And you can see from this slide, we went to 4 more states, and 6 more operators. And this we've already started on the same program with these guys, and these are also large operators. And you can see in the bottom right, together the 2023, 2024 operators account for more than a quarter of all of the excavation damages that occur in the nation every year. So, and there are success stories in every one of these so far. There are success stories, and you'll see one here in a second. So okay, Dave, you went out to these 11 operators and you talked about threats and mitigations and alike. Well, what was these are some common threads across all 11 of these large operators. There were several things that were common thread, common complaints, common threats, which I know are true in the state of Delaware as well. And these are just the 3 of them. We're not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time, but locator performance, right? Everybody the 11 that we had all identified locator performance initially. And within from unlocatables, you can see there, I don't need to read them all to you, but the unlocatables, the contract locating, in-house locating, whether it's single source locating, all of these different particular things tied to locator performance. And the one thing about locator performance is that is entirely the accountability of you, the operator. So, but that was even in the 11, all 11 operators identified locating as one of their greatest threats. None of the 11 operators had ever put locating performance in their integrity management programs. All 11 of them now have it in their integrity management programs. And so, I can get into some details of how we measure that and what we're doing. The second one, fiber, and this is no surprise. I can't imagine it's any different in Delaware. The installation of new fiber or telecom in general, we have states that, fiber's coming in and we're putting in a one-call ticket that's, 4 miles long. And, the state has 2-3 days to locate that. And it's, these are the kind of things tied to fiber that have created strains across the nation. And we, again, we know that. Well, we don't want to ignore it because, well, it's fiber and we don't have any control over it. No, we're not ignoring it. We have mitigations from companies that, that are addressing it at a NARUC level and other efforts underway. And PHMSA is a part of those task forces that have been generated to address the fiber threat. And then, of course, the ongoing problem that we all are familiar with no one call tickets, right? In what was odd in several, not all of them, but several of the operators, was the no one call tickets from professional excavators. That was what was a little bit surprising to me. So anyway, these are just, I want to share some of the common threats that we've seen. And, you know, when we start talking about the mitigations to those threats, and we talked about locator performance across the board, we realized, you know, that one of the best, probably the best lead measure we can have as an operator is to assess your performance of your on-time locates. And that's what this busy slide is doing. This was so beneficial that everyone that we are engaging, we are making them hold a monthly dashboard, create a monthly dashboard of their on-time locates. And this is a real example. This chart is a real example of one of those 11 operators where we engaged him late in 2023 and said, in 24, you're going to be subject to this DIMP program that we're initiating. And, you know, these are the kind of things we expect. And you can see year over year, this is this one operator that oh, somebody is you can see the performance, the performance improvement in the percentage of on-time locates that this particular operator had. So one of the takeaways, and Wayne may very well be sharing this with you folks this year, is we're going to be pushing for the state partners, the state pipeline safety offices, to have their operators establish a monthly dashboard of their performance of on-time locates. It's just a lead measure that, you know, Wayne can, if this were reflective of something in Delaware, he can look at this and you know, hey, listen, how come in this, you know, particular month you seem to drop down, and Wayne has a tool now available to him to work with you on steps that need to be taken to improve, you know, the on time. Again, on time locating, if they're not on time, you run the risk, all of the risks that come with not having that facility located. So this is just an illustration of what it looked like with a particular operator last year. And here's a dashboard of, this is SoCal Gas. Now they're a giant operator, right? This is Los Angeles and the Southern Cal area. They were the second pilot operator in 2023, and their numbers weren't much different, you know, than this person before us. You know, they were in this kind of category when we started this pilot. And once we started looking at this, we meaning this state CPUC, the California Public Utility Commission, and PHMSA, we started looking at this. They got serious. They moved 100% of their locating to in-house, and they built just a robust metric-based program around locating. And you know, their executive vice president, who was in the room with us when we met, said we are not going to fail in this. And this is an illustration. You know, this is the first half of 2024, and that's their performance. And I honestly, this is a giant company, and that is their performance with regard to late tickets on time. And you know, you could see none of the damages in the first half of this year are related to late tickets. Now there are missed marks for sure, and certainly no shortage of other damages. But when it comes to the accountability of the locating task, they have excelled because of that. You know, I asked and they gave me permission to show this. So it looks like Richard Cleveland. I'm getting a lot of feedback off of yours. I think it's.
Apologize for that.
What's that? There you go. All right. So
Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. All good. Hey, so again, this is an illustration for, again, the folks, the operator, listen, there are operators that say, this must be fake. They must be baking some numbers. CPUC went in and verified that no, they didn't. This is accurate. So again, takeaway for the folks on this call, heads up, we, PHMSA, are pushing heavily on the states to have operators create dashboards on a monthly basis where we can see, have visibility into how well you're performing with regard to your locating function. So, I would all scratch that one down as a takeaway, because we're looking to do that. So, well, I mentioned 11 operators, however many states that was, and what's next? What are we doing next? And my executive leadership said we're going to continue pushing this. It's effective. We've demonstrated it is effective, and the principles, the concept of utilizing integrity management for the purpose of excavation safety. Well, the first thing is it's not new. We were supposed to be doing this all along, and I think the DIMP rule kicked in about 15 years ago. And there's nothing that ever said that we shouldn't be doing this for excavation safety. In fact, I got money in my wallet that says the folks on this phone have excavation damage already listed as a threat in your integrity management program. But the question is what are the mitigations? And when it was started 15 years ago, the mitigation was participate in 811. Well, this effort is to get down into some tangible efforts that are, demonstrated that have a positive yield. And that's so my instruction, my orders have been to continue to push this concept, this approach throughout the nation. And we don't just focus on giant operators. It's everyone. And so, you can see there, LDCs, municipalities, and the like, and we are going to continue that. I know Wayne and I have talked this last year about opportunities in Delaware, and Wayne will continue to hear from me, and we're going to try to get those opportunities deployed. So that's what's next in this. So when I said in the beginning of this presentation, hang on, this story is coming to a town near you. It is coming to a town near you. I encourage you to jump in front of this and start really kind of wrapping your head around what has happened with this program, and to see what steps you can take in advance of us knocking on your door. And again, this is just another example of one of those operators in these different categories that have shown some positive outcomes. It's just to dovetail the two bullets above that says we're going to be pushing this again throughout the nation. So that's the DIMP program, and while that was a kind of an update on all of that, I just wanted to share that with you because, again, it is going to impact you at some point. The only other update, I just wanted to put this out there just as more of an FYI. It's a slightly different topic, and that is, as you all know, this coming by this coming March 15th, you will have submitted your 7100 reports, your gas distribution annual reports that will now have these 26 root cause categories, which are in line with the CGA's root cause categories. That first year for the distribution is coming out now, and there's just a couple of comments when it comes to this. The one of them is on our website. We provide the CGA's guide to these 26 cause categories. And we use that, we PHMSA are using that guide for definition purposes. But one of the things you'll see a nuance is in the CGA manual, they have a caveat that says that the data is not used for enforcement purposes. And what's important to remember is when it comes to dirt data for CGA. That is true. It's a very true statement. That is not true for 7100 reporting. So and this came up from an operator that caught this and called me. And I said, no. So I'm just putting that out there, that while that you'll see something on, the guide that has that statement highlighted in yellow, it is not applicable to you, the regulated operator. It's really for category descriptions. All right. Nothing to harp on this, but it's nothing different for you. It's just, I wanted to point that out. And the other one, here's the other one. You now have 26 root causes, and this has come up to me, and I know you, the operator, I know the position that you take on this, because I was an operator, 2 different companies, and that's the position I took. For example, a ticket that has an expiration date, and I don't remember in Delaware what the expiration time is. Wayne, what is the expiration of a ticket?
Right now we don't. There's no expiration as long as you maintain the marks, but they're in a process of going to modify the law, try to get it passed.
Okay.
That was earlier with Jason Lyon on his presentation.
Okay. And so, what I can give you, for example, in Indiana, they have a hard expiration date, and I want to say it's 21 days, maybe 28 days. And so the question is, on day 30, or 3 days after that ticket expired, there's an excavation damage, and the excavator did not renew that ticket. How do you categorize that excavation damage? And the operator said, well, we would put that as no one call, because the ticket expired, or if you have an expired ticket. And then I asked, well, what if the marks are still present? Doesn't matter. Okay. What if the marks are still present, but they were mismarked by 10 feet? Doesn't matter. The ticket expired. And so this has not been well defined in writing, but I have said, no, that's not going to fly, because the reality is, and this I know with data, is if you do call for a renewal of that ticket, the locators 9 out of 10 times will say, are marks still present? Yes. And out of that, we'll just say some of the time, the locator will go, okay, we're just going to renew your ticket, and they never show up. And then when they do show up, they just put the paint over the existing paint, because they were the ones that were there 28 days ago. So, and I have asked probably 30 different locators, from in-house to contract locators, these same questions, and they 100% have said, the most I've ever done was I went out for a refresh to a guy that had located it the first time, who I know is an idiot or is not good at their job, and I had hooked up to verify their marks. But if I did the marks 28 days ago, I'm not hooking up, I'm painting over my same marks. Well, so the argument that says, if I'm called for a refresh, and you the excavator did not give me an opportunity to correct my mistake, 28 days ago, therefore it's your fault. That doesn't fly. So the bottom line there is, we, with the 26 root cause categories, it really is a question of, if the proper barriers were deployed, it would have prevented the damage. So in that example I just gave you, the proper barrier would be an accurate locate. So now, if marks are gone, then yes, it makes sense. We don't have a solid, answer here, and we're going to rely on you, the operator, to understand, hey, which one should we use as a category? What is the best barrier that failed? Which barrier failed that really caused this, right? We have the mismarks with, well, yeah, but the excavator didn't pothole, and if they potholed, they would have realized that They didn't find our facility, and they could have called us back, and on and on. And that doesn't carry any weight, because if they're outside of your tolerance zone, they don't have to pothole. I mean, it depends on what state you're in. There are some states that still require that. But in any case, if it just doesn't work, if the mismark is a mismark outside of your tolerance zone, that's got to be the predominant barrier that failed, and therefore that's how it should be categorized. I understand this adversely impacts the optic of your data, but the whole purpose, the whole intent of the distribution annual report and collecting this data is to identify threats that can be mitigated. I'll say one more thing and then I'm done, and that is, and I happen to know this is the case in Delaware, but it's also the case across the country. Where do we put an excavation damage on a shallow pipe? And the answer is, it ultimately, there's a number of categories, and it's been used so diversely that it doesn't really matter. I have made a push to try to identify shallow pipe as a cause category, and it hasn't gone anywhere yet. So here's what I would say: whether you put a shallow pipe dig in the excavator category or whether you put it in the other category, at the end of the day, when Wayne knocks on your door and says, how many of these damages were on shallow pipe, you, the operator, you need to be prepared on the ready to answer that question. Because if you're not, you're in violation of 617. So there is a push, there will be a focus, if you will, on the topic of shallow pipe in this year to come. And like I said, I know that's problematic. It is problematic in probably every state in this country. So Delaware is not unique, but we happens to be a Delaware example that has driven a renewed focus on the topic of shallow pipe. So I have rambled on. How am I doing? Oh, look at it. I'm ahead of time. I have rambled on, and this is the opportunity for you folks to grill me with questions, complaints go to Wayne, compliments come to me. But let's ask these questions. We're not helping each other if you're not getting something answered that you wanted to get answered. So the floor is open.
Yeah,
Mr.
I have-
Applebaum, how would you categorize an area where tree roots have created a thatch over top of where we know underground pipelines are located and the excavators approach to get in there?
Yep. That's a great question. I get that quite a bit, and your operators aren't going to like my answer. The excavator has a responsibility to excavate safely. So I want to break that question down into a sub question. And the first one is, if I am the excavator and I go for got a job marked and it's located, and the located facility is right under a substantial tree with rooting system, and I call you, the operator, and say, hey, I'm afraid to excavate here. There's no way there aren't roots impinging on or encroaching on your pipe, and I don't want to damage it. What's the operator's answer? And I've heard, well, do your best, or we'll come and we'll relocate our pipe, but you're paying for it. And Dave's opinion is absolutely not. It's incumbent upon you, the operator, to protect your facility. I have a right to excavate. And if I call you in advance and say I'm concerned about the safety of this excavation because of root, it is incumbent upon you under integrity management to protect your facility. How you do that is up to you. If you relocate it and you charge that excavator, that's between you and the excavator. But if it ever comes to my desk, my response is nope. In theory, you should have prevented that root from impinging or encroaching on your pipe to start with. Yeah. So it's a tough one, and I get that that's a difficult one, and there's probably operators on the phone right now that are, maybe getting their adrenaline up a little bit. But the answer is, do you want the excavator trying to do that? And I have a picture of it's a service, but it's wrapped through rooting systems. I have it, actually, there's one with a 2-inch main. Actually, it's and it's right under a large tree, and they showed the roots. You, the operator, cannot expect an excavator to mitigate that safely. It becomes incumbent upon you to do that. So tough one. And really, Lorraine, it's gonna fall on Wayne to say, how he wants to resolve that particular scenario. But Dave's opinion is that it's incumbent upon the operator to protect their facility.
Here's another one that's come up recently. We had a contractor doing excavation and demolition at a warehouse, and they were going to rebuild the warehouse facility. And while they called in a ticket, the ticket was active. It was cleared 4 days prior to the damage happening. And when it was cleared, it said that there were no gas pipelines in the area. However, 4 days later, they hit a 4-inch gas main that had just recently been installed and activated, but was unmarked because the installers did not mark it. And the communication went to the general contractor, project manager, not to the excavator that was on site.
So the 4-inch was not marked?
No, it was not.
Okay. And I mean, to me, that's a responsibility of the operator. How would it, maybe I'm missing something, but if it's an unmarked facility that's active, there's a duty to mark.
They were saying, since it had just been previously installed after the ticket had been cleared, that they didn't hold liability for that because the excavator should have called for a remark. And I was like, but how is he supposed to know? Well, we told the general contractor.
Well, is there communication that the general contractor was aware of this 4-inch main?
The general contractor was, but somehow it didn't trickle down to the excavation contractor. And that's the current.
Yeah, okay. So, right, here's the thing. I would say, first of all, matters that require a legal conclusion are, really reserved for, your legal folks. The operator always has a responsibility to protect their facility. The question of whether they, adequately protected their facility by way of communication to, the general contractor, that seems okay to me. It's not that they didn't communicate, it's that they, that the communication didn't make its way to where it mattered. Well, is that the operator's fault? I don't know. That's a matter for, litigation. And I would say, let your lawyers discuss that nuance. At the end of the day, excavator has a responsibility to excavate safely, and the operator has a responsibility to protect their facility. So that failed in this case, and but it doesn't strike me as a failure on the operator's part, because they did communicate. And should they have known to communicate elsewhere? That's, Lorraine, you guys have to figure that out.
Dave, in that particular instance, they put the line in. Wouldn't it have been easier on everybody if they, as soon as they finished, go out there and throw some paint on there over where they just put the line? And
yeah, so a lot of folks, a lot of operators now are installing markers, and like when they do new installation or replacing, old facilities. They're either putting marker balls or doing some other stuff. You know, listen, I can't sit here in an armchair quarterback that one. I have to look at the details and really, even with the details, it's not my, I'm just the Dave opinion. It really is a discussion with, your legal group to, to assess liability. These questions are easy. Anybody got any tough ones?
Nobody out of almost 30 people.
Well, I will stop sharing, and if any questions pop up, you can certainly shoot them to me and see if I can't get them answered for you.
Dave, thank you for your time, for your presentation. And
You bet.
Send us your slide package.
Yep, I'll send Lorraine this deck, and you're welcome to share it.
All right, thank you.
Guys have
Owners, a husband and wife, they did notice a fire in the middle of the night. They evacuated the home. The wife decided that she wanted to go and grab some memorabilia items, such as photos and children's stuff. So she went back in and understand the fire is consuming the roof of the house. It's a natural gas release. She comes out with the few items, decides that she wants to go in again. The husband tries to prevent her. She goes back not twice, but 5 times. And then the last time is when the fatality occurred. And, it's the point of the thing is, though a photo and old photography may trigger meaningful memories, we as inspectors or operators, we know that it's not worth our life to capture them. You can always create new memories, but the public, they're not aware. They don't know the seriousness of gas, and this is very tragic for the woman to die this way. So basically, my outline today. AID, I'm going to describe who AID is. I will give you some Delaware facts. I'll discuss some about national accident and incident trends, and also discuss a Atmos Dallas case study. So this is AID. We are spread out the United States. Chris Rule is our director. We have 2 supervisors under him. There's 6 in each of the supervisors, with 2 senior investigators and an administrative assistant. So AID was established on April 1st, 2017. The purpose was to review, evaluate, and circulate National Response Center notifications. It also managed the investigation from the initial NRC to what the cause was. We also do on-site accident investigations. We support NTSB. We support state investigations. We review the operator 30-day incident and accident reports. Not all incidents. If it's a reportable incident, yes, it has to have a 30-day report, but the non-reportable ones also require 30-day reports. For liquid operators, we require anything over 5 gallons of a spill, you have to have a 30-day report. We also publish state and federal monthly accident report summaries called SMARS and MARS. We analyze data to identify emerging trends, and we also capture and share lessons learned through safe bulletins, state conferences, seminars, and etc. So when I pulled up the Delaware data, I was very much impressed. You can see right here from 2010 to 2023, you had 3 reportable incidents. And you can see 2010 and 2011, there was one each year there. And then in 2014, there was another one. So the one that you had reported, the 2010 and 2011, was damage by car, truck, or other motorized vehicle equipment not engaged in excavation. And you can see how that compares with the national reportable incidents. It's number 2 on the national side. So it's very good. Usually this column is a full column, but with Delaware, my job's a lot easier. You only have 2 to report here. And heavy rains and floods, you can see the scale from the national level. The heavy rains are way down the list here, about the middle of the list for the national reportable incidents. So this is risk factors that we look for. Cathodic protection, it's been around and everyone's aware of it, but it's the number 1 and number 2 cause of rupture. And the communications hazard assessment, what could go wrong? That's probably the best way to look at when you're looking at hazards. Try to figure out scenarios of what could go wrong in that situation. I'm just going to go through some of these, not every one of them. Construction, what we see is design. When they construct something, if it's incorrectly designed, the failure is greater, or the design of that item. They may have designed a dead leg on a liquid line that serves no purpose. It was probably created to expand the facility, but never been used, and that's a design flaw that could eventually lead to a incident. The start employee. I had a case for individual. It was a distribution company. They hired a young kid. He was distracted with his phone. Nothing with the gas side, but he had a diesel truck. He overfilled the diesel or the oil. He was changing the oil. He overfilled the oil. Instead of removing the oil out of the truck, he capped it and started the truck and destroyed the truck. So that, it's very important that you figure out what's the threats in the system, and try to make an assessment based upon those threats. So right here, I'm going to talk about gas transmission and gas distribution. The top part is all risk factors to present, and gas distribution risk factors. And you can see excavation is number 1 on gas distribution. That's, like you said, it can be a variety of things, not located. People digging in yards, trying to put their mailboxes. We had a mayor that dug up his mailbox and broke the PE and decided to fix it with a duct tape, and called it in and said, there's a leak on his pipeline. And those are something that we see. Procedures not followed. This is something that can be fixed. A newer individual that started in the company may follow the procedures a little better than a individual that's been there for quite some time. So how do we correct this? Is have a span of control. Have check the new and the older employees. Have them explain what the procedure is. Have them go through it and demonstrate it. Because they may have a valuable insight on something that needs to be updated on the procedures. Human error, that is usually maintenance work, if somebody's doing maintenance work, leaving a valve closed where it should have been open after the maintenance work. The on the transmission side, you can see integrity threat identification was number one. That's because of the liquid operators. They don't assess the internal corrosion as much as they need to. Preventive maintenance, it's also something that we see that for example, like O-rings on pump seals, if they do maintenance on it and they pinch the seal on the O-ring and not review their work or go back and check the area and it develops a leak and an incident happens. And you can see procedures not followed also is number 3 on the transmission side. And risk factors undefined for distribution, that is something like a fire caused by lightning strikes or a God-made type of threat. So here's all of hazardous liquid subcauses, all of gas transmission subcauses, and all of gas distribution subcauses. And you can see as in the distribution side, excavation damage is number 1 versus the hazardous liquid side. Excavation damage is way up on top on the scale. That could be maybe having different aerial patrols or foot patrols, or there may be something they're doing that's different than what the distribution side, but distribution side versus the hazardous liquid, you're looking at a lot of pipelines in a right-of-way in a class 1, 2, or they don't have classes, but in a low HCA area. The gas transmission, you can see excavation damage is number 3. And then internal corrosion is number 1 on the hazardous liquid. And non-threaded connection failure was number 2. The gas transmission internal corrosion was number 2. And excavation is number 3. And external corrosion was number 4. So these are the hazardous liquid failures resulting in ruptures for hazardous liquid and gas transmission. And you can see not much of a difference when it comes to corrosion. So like I said before, what are we doing wrong on corrosion? Since it's been around so long, why is it coming up as the top 3 here as a cause of rupture in pipelines? Well, I'll discuss it. All right. This is the percentage of close interval survey that most hazardous liquid and gas transmission pipelines do on their system. And you can see is 33% on hazardous liquid and 38%. So the close interval survey, regardless if there's a impressed current system with anodes tied to it, it can still show you areas where you have corrosion issues when you do off reads. And why aren't we doing more of these? So it's a very important test to do to identify areas in pipeline that may have potential to anomalies. So here's where do the hazard liquid failures occur and where natural gas failures occur. So the blue, it's in the operators for the liquid side. It's the operator's control property, and it might have flowed or migrated off the property. 991 percent or 21% is in the right of way, and 73% is in the operator's control property. And then the natural gas side of it, it's 50-50. So it happens at the operator's property and also at the right of way. So this is external corrosion after a tool run, and you're probably thinking, how is that possible? So for a tool run to happen, you'd send a ILI tool through the system for the hazardous liquid and gas transmission. The liquid has 5-year interval to do assessment for the tool run, and the gas transmission has a 7-year interval. So after they run the tool, they have to run a complementary tool to determine if those anomalies are accurate. And after they find these anomalies, then they determine the assessment method they're going to do to ensure that the pipeline is still good or has the potential to keep going. So most people do a hydro test, or I shouldn't say most, but some do hydro test to ensure the strength of the pipeline. And you can see on the hazardous liquid side, the corrosion failures after hydro testing. It's way up after that first year. You can see this is the first year, and the second year it's even gone higher. So proper cleaning was probably not done. Water remained in the pipeline and created a corrosion, and eventually created maybe a pinhole leak or something else on that. And also the gas transmission failures, you can see during that first year is where you find most of those failures occurring. And same reason, like pipeline is not cleaned out properly. So leak investigation, in most places I've seen, they use the flame ionization pack. They do use the RMLDs. But the RMLDs is not to me, looking at it, is not as good as the flame ionization pack unit. This unit can pinpoint a leak. You can see how this individual did a 360 bar hole testing till a 0% gas was obtained. And it's very nice to see a diagram or an area where he found that where the 0%'s been identified. The house that I deployed to, the individual didn't have any kind of graphs to show me that he zeroed out the percentages of gas. They did find gas in the several nearby homes, and they evacuated the whole block. But a good graph or a good picture says a lot of says 1,000 words. So the purpose is to get zero gas in all directions. Check the nearby homes. If no one is home, check doors, windows. If a positive reading is obtained, evacuate. Check the nearby manholes. If you find any positive gas reads, continue your investigation. So here's a test that they did. It's a man-made leak underground. They tested this in a remote location, and you can see picture A is a dry and sunny day. So what they did is they allowed gas to release for 24 hours and then shut it off. And so this first picture, after 6 hours, you can see that there's not much gas underground. It's making its way out of the soil to the air. There's no resistance. It's finding that path to get out of the ground. After 24 hours, same scenario. It is venting like it should, and they shut off the gas after 24 hours, and you can see the gas is completely out of the system for this dry condition. The second situation is a rainy situation. It continued for raining maybe 3 to 4 days. You can see after 6 hours, the gas has not migrated out of the ground. It's still in the ground here. And after 24 hours, some has released, but you can see most of it is still in the ground. And then after turning it off, after 24 hours, you can see there is still gas in the soil after that, after the termination was done. And the last picture is it's not the dry snow, but this is more of the icy snow, which is compact. A dry snow would allow the gas to vent, through at least it'd be more porous to let the gas out. But you can see in this case where it was an icy condition, the gas remained underground that first 6 hours. After 24 hours, it increased. And then after it was turned off, nothing changed. The gas still remained in the system, which tells you that the soil conditions plays a very important part when there's rain or wet conditions. So this is the picture that I showed in the front. This is the house explosion that I deployed to. What happened? I'm sorry. The first one here, grade 2 leak. This is where the fire occurred. And when I got deployed to this location, as soon as I arrived to this location, another house explosion occurred, which was 0.3 miles away. It was raining for maybe 3 to 4 days. So the gas, on both these cases, the gas had migrated to the homes, causing a gas leak and a house explosion. So this is a case study I want to show to you guys. It's a Atmos Energy in Dallas, Texas, gas migration. It had 1 fatality and 3 injuries. February 23 of 2018. So February 21st, 2018, day 1, this house had an incident at 5:49 a.m. So this homeowner heard some popping noise in the attic where the heater unit is located. So he went up there and he saw that the steel cover to the furnace was not on the unit. It was lying on the floor. So he decided to put the cover back on, and as soon as he hit that that spring there, the pilot igniter ignited. An explosion occurred, throwing him backwards, and he never smelled any gas or odor. The arson investigators responded and determined the cause as undetermined. The gas company also was on site, but was not allowed to test because of structure damage. And heavy rains had saturated the ground quite a bit in this area. And this is day 2. This is house number 2, had an incident at 10:21 a.m. The homeowner was alone and began to boil water. And when the flames acted erratically, and it kind of went out of control and engulfed him. The fire traveled to the attic, causing additional damage. And this also, the arson investigators interviewed the witness and determined that it was an appliance issue, and no gas odor was detected by residents. Rain is continuing. And this is day number 3. House number 3 had an incident at 6:38 a.m. with a fatality and 3 injured, and 1 released from the hospital. They lived at the home for 1 month. After full renovation, they put new gas and sewer lines to the alley. This homeowner heard a loud pop in the kitchen around 11 p.m., but found no source. And then he did not smell gas prior to the explosion. And NTSB, Texas Railroad Commission, and PHMSA launched to investigate this incident. So leak surveys were performed. at each explosion with the RMLD and CGI. And you can see in a lot of cases, the CGI, if it's a wet condition, the sensors you don't want to get wet. And so it's not a good test, but if you do a bar hole, even with the bar hole, you'll get water in there and it won't give you a good test. So that's why the RMLD was used here. The pressure testing of mains were done and services with air to determine the integrity of the pipeline. The customer piping can be tested, but it can be damaged because of the fires and explosion. The mains were cut and capped and held at test pressure. And if a leak was identified, the flow test to determine the size of the failure. And then if there was large sections that failed, they decided to break it into smaller sections. So this is pretty much what they did. You can see they cut and capped and they pressure tested the lines here. They also closed in the meter, and you can see leaks at the service tee and stopcock. Some leaks will cause test pressure failures, but they're not hazardous. Then usually these leaks they're inadequate to migrate to any distance. The flow rate testing pipelines that fail test pressure should be performed prior to exposing buried leaks. So in other words, they need to test those pipelines prior to exposing them. So here's what they found. During the excavation, they dug it up, and the sand beating for the sewer line was a conduit for the gas migration. It showed that there was 35% LEL gas still in the ground here, 9 days after the gas was shut off. So you can see how wet conditions keep gas in the ground. And this is something, discoloration is a common thing for release of natural gas. It also can dry out and scrub out odorant. So that's the reason why these homeowners didn't smell the mercaptan. This is what they found. They found a Coke bottle in this area, dated to 12/15/95, and that date corresponded to the date where they installed a sewer line. So what they did, they installed a sewer line, and it only had 2 inches of clearance. And so what they decided to do was push down on the sewer line, and that pushed down on the gas line. You can see how it dented the gas line. And it was done in 1995, and it dented and gouged with the excavation equipment and failed 23 years later as a circumferential crack. And you can see where they found it. And yeah, it was a bad situation for them. And you can see these gouge right here on the B1 to BR or B1. And this is where the picture laid out. The red line is the area of that the sewer line, and they also had a grade 2 leak further down the block there, but the migration came from that damaged pipeline, from the sewer line, and the gas migrated, and also it migrated with the wet conditions. It removed all the mercaptan by the time it got into the house, and that's why the individuals in those 3 homes could not smell it. be safe while working. I wanted to show you this picture. They put a shore in here, but what did they do wrong here? If can anybody? I know it's saying. I guess the answer is right here. Compression coupling, right here. You don't want that when you want to pressure test a pipeline. It'll shoot out like a rocket. That's one thing. But the support. You see how this telephone pole is there? That's not a good means of shoring. That pole can lean over at any time. And so it's when you're out there, these are things you got to look for. It's is it safe? Is this a safe working condition? And the last picture I have here is the Texas Sandman Signature Hotel explosion that occurred. You can see this individual, the operator, is trying to use a drone to check the gas meter and also the above ground structure to see if it was safe to have somebody go down there and work on check the meter. In this incident, they pressure tested everything up to the meter and found no leaks. What had happened was after the meter customer line, they did some work inside the restaurant, and there was a leak inside there, and that leak caused the explosion. And that is pretty much it for me. And if you have any questions, I'm all ears right now.
Well, hey, Blessing, I think the pictures are good illustration. The more illustrations in Delaware of what happens when we do have a gas incident, and I hope we don't see one, anytime soon. But I just make you more aware that that things can happen, and
Yes.
we'll do whatever we can to mitigate that and make everybody safe, not only the employees and excavators, the public. So I want to thank you for the pictures, and
Absolutely.
pictures are worth 1,000 words.
So there's a question here from Carlos. If they did not smell gas, did the operator test odor levels in the gas? They did. So the odor levels coming out of the pipe was it was fine. The gas had migrated and went through the soil is where it depreciated that mercaptan out of the soil.
Any more questions, anybody? Well, then we'll break until 3:15.
Thank you, everyone.
Also, yep, thank you, Mr. Matthew. If I did send a message to a couple of people who are in the meeting that have not sent me their contact information. If you could check in chat and see if you have a message from me and send me that, then I can put you on our attendance list. I would appreciate that. And it was very interesting, Mr. Matthew, to look at everything from an investigative perspective.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's a different ball game with the investigation.
It's important too. Now, I know you don't work for NTSB, but I think if you could comment on when they show up, what I've always heard that well, I know, I think they make the state sign an agreement so that only NTSB can talk to the media, and then anybody finds has to be turned over to them and that sort of thing. So I know that's hard for some people in the state to get a grasp on that. Oh well, how can that happen? But I think doesn't it go back to the original agreement that was signed as a state partner with PHMSA, and then somehow I don't understand how that relationship works with NTSB and with that sort of thing a little more.
And PHMSA. Yeah, so when NTSB gets deployed, is usually if it's it's a reportable incident, there's a fatality. It's it depends. They make their determination, and they will let us know that they're going to deploy. We also deploy with them. They do make the states and the operator sign a waiver that nothing will be disclosed until the investigation is complete. But as PHMSA, we don't sign that form because we're still a federal agency, but it's understood that we would not share also. So this particular one with the house burning, that is still under their investigation, and there's they haven't closed that out yet, but for the cause of the incident. But yeah, that's how it usually works. We accompany them. We provide them with the codes if they need it. They do rely PHMSA on inspection with the operator and so forth. I'm sorry.
State does not sign that NTSB paperwork. Then my understanding is they get kicked off the investigation. Is that correct?
I lost you, Wayne, on that. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. If the agreement, the waiver, we want to call it, it's not signed, the state doesn't sign it, then they're not allowed to participate in the investigation. Is that correct?
No, they are allowed to participate on the investigation with NTSB.
Yeah, right.
But they cannot share that with any.
Like that, people, because we have not had an event. They have a hard time understanding how that works because they think, oh, it's state rights and everything. And I said, well, that's not how it works.
Right.
I'm just trying.
Yeah, they take over. Yeah, they take over. They take the items to be examined for their laboratory. So they, yeah,
because you have to realize in this state, most of the emergency, because we haven't had an event, is all like hazmat and chemical stuff that goes on, and there's a big process in the state that revolves around that particular item. But they really don't have any experience with actually participating in a gas event, and we don't either. In the PSC here, we haven't.
Hopefully not.
No, yeah, I know, but I mean, to me, it's just a matter of when. It's just not.
Right. Yes.
And you know how people are. They tend to not get too concerned until there's blood on the ground. I hate to say that word, but blood on the ground, and then
Right. And a lot of time, PHMSA will work with the state and kind of run through you the kind of process when they get involved. So we're over there to help you also, to sort through it.
Good to know. Any other questions from anybody? I mean, that's time to ask on this stuff because I know some of the participants here, they're from other states, they've had events and everything, so they kind of know, been through the drill, so to speak. So, all right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Listen. And can you share that slideshow or not?
Yes, I'll share it with you guys. I'll send it over right now.
That'd be great. And again, we'll go to 3:15.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself to you all and introduce our organization. My name is Bill Karam, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pipeline Safety Trust. And before I tell you a little bit about who we are, I just want to say I really appreciate the invitation from Wayne. As Wayne knows, while I live in Bellingham, Washington, now all the way in the upper northwest corner of the U.S., my heart is in Delaware. I grew up in Delaware and went to University of Delaware. I'm a Fighting Blue Hen. And so it's really great to connect with all of you, and want to thank all of you for your participation today shows your commitment to pipeline safety. And so thank you for the work you do in keeping the public safe. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization. We were formed in the aftermath of a tragedy. There was a pipeline carrying hazardous liquid. It was a hazardous liquid pipeline carrying, at the time, gasoline through the community of Bellingham. And this was June 10th, 1999. And as so many pipeline tragedies it was a series of different things that went wrong, any one of which would have prevented the tragedy from happening, but they all happened. And it's often called the Swiss cheese effect, where everything just kind of lined up, unfortunately, in the right way. And there was a rupture in the pipeline. It spilled 250,000 gallons of gasoline into the creek that runs through our town, and it eventually ignited, and it killed 3 boys, 2 10-year-old boys and an 18-year-old boy. That failure started initially with excavation damage. A third party was doing some excavation around the pipeline. They struck the pipeline and did not report it. And years later, on inline inspection run, the operator saw the anomaly and decided that it did not need to be repaired. They were, on this day, on June 10th, 1999, they had been dealing with a faulty valve downstream from this that kept closing. It was installed properly, and it kept closing, sending a pressure wave up the pipeline, wearing down on that anomaly. On this particular day, they were also updating the software in their control room, and so they were running blind when this happened. That faulty valve did and recognized the pressure drop after the rupture. It shut down. They were running blind. They assumed it was just like one of the other 65 times this had happened in the previous months, that it shut down when it shouldn't, and they reopened it and continued to pump gasoline into the creek. So yeah, about 250,000 gallons of gasoline ultimately was emptied into the creek. So after those 3 boys died, the family of those boys and the community of Bellingham rallied. They learned a lot about pipelines and were aghast to learn about how little they were regulated and how often tragedies like this really happened. So they advocated to the Department of Justice for the formation of a watchdog organization on the pipeline industry and the regulators. And they were successful in that. The Department of Justice set aside money for an endowment to form that organization, and that's what became the Pipeline Safety Trust. And so we are the only nationwide nonprofit organization from the public interest working on pipeline safety. And we continue to do that 25 years on. Earlier this year, on June 10th, was the 25th year anniversary of this tragedy. And we did a community remembrance event and really came back to why we are all doing the work that we do, and just reminding everyone what happens when you don't do enough for pipeline safety. With that, our mission is to promote pipeline safety through education and advocacy, increased access to information and partnerships with residents, safety advocates, government and industry, resulting in safer communities and a healthier environment. So we do a lot. Being the only organization working on this from the public perspective, sometimes we find ourselves being really strong advocates and fighting for enforcement and new laws, and sometimes we're in more of a collaborative relationship with the industry and with the regulators, and working on really how do we make pipelines safer. We really, as much as we can, try to focus on the collaborative aspect, and I always like to come back to the idea that all of the stakeholders involved in pipeline safety, and there's more than this chart here really represents. There's a lot more than this, but we all want safer pipelines and zero incidents, and really looking to that shared goal in the middle there. A little bit about how we go about accomplishing our mission and improving pipeline safety. We do a state website transparency review where we look at all the state programs, including Delaware, and evaluate the website for transparency. We find that a lot of times members of the public, the first place they look when they are trying to learn about pipelines, they find themselves on the state website. And so making that as transparent and as usable as possible helps educate people, and an educated public is a safer public. And I'll talk a little bit more about that transparency review and how Delaware has done on that in a minute. We also hold a pipeline safety conference, and we just had that a couple weeks ago. We do it every year, generally in New Orleans. We've done it since 2006, and it's really the only place where members of the public, the pipeline industry, and the regulators, tribes, all the stakeholders get together. And a lot of times they're often adversarial stakeholders, and there's pretty passionate conversations, but we try to really promote a sense of respect and listening to each other. And I think we've been largely successful with that, even though we really do have very difficult conversations. And so I encourage all of you to look into participating in the future. It's been growing a lot, and we're really proud of the work that we do there. And you can find on our website a lot of videos of the past conferences and panel discussions, and there's a lot there. We also do a State of Pipeline Safety blog series. Our data manager looks at state pipeline safety data on a state-by-state basis and releases them one at a time. We have not gotten to Delaware yet, but we will. We also do a right-of-way roundup, which is a daily email that rounds up all of the news stories about pipeline safety and puts them in one place in an email. And you can find that on our website as well. I encourage you all to sign up for that. I've heard from a lot of folks, especially industry folks, who are really focused on their system, their one pipeline, and they thankfully it's rare for an individual pipeline system to fail. And so I think a lot of those folks don't realize how many pipeline failures really do happen nationwide. And so seeing them all in one place there, I think, is a good reminder of to stay humble and to continue to take pipeline safety seriously, because these failures are still happening on a regular basis. Another thing we're looking at doing starting soon is doing that website transparency review, but on operators, maybe the 25 or 30 largest operators across different pipeline systems, and seeing how transparent their websites are. A little bit about Delaware's website transparency review. When we rank the states according to their score, Delaware's about 2/3 of the way down, and considered a failing grade. But I will say, over the 10+ years we've been doing this transparency review, Delaware has made a lot of progress. Started off with a very low score and has made a lot of progress, but there is still a lot of progress to be made. We offer free of charge a audit of your website and make suggestions on how you could increase your score or get to a perfect score. We do have a handful of states that do earn perfect scores each year. It is possible. You can see here the area that we found is strongest for Delaware is the find and the connect. It is really easy to find your website and to find the staff members that are in charge of pipeline safety and get a hold of them. And so that's great. And then the really descriptions over what the agency does and the authority that they have, which we think is really important to have on the website for the public, is where Delaware has scored the lowest or could make the most improvements. We also include in that report a little bit about the pipelines in the state. And as you can see, here's some data about the pipeline mileage and what of that Delaware has authority over. And then we don't see this very much. And if there's anything we want to see progress on, it's on the actual incidents, and having 0 significant incidents, 0 injuries, 0 fatalities. We just looked from 2018 to 23, but I know that goes back even farther for Delaware. And so that's really great, really rare, and something to be proud of. So some things that we are working on as an organization, there's a lot, even though Delaware has had really, 0 incidents. The rest of the country does not have that. And I'll go a little bit into the state of pipeline safety data to show that. And so all the ways that we think we can get to 0 incidents and really make some progress on pipeline safety. This is really what we're looking at, requiring rupture mitigation valves. They're now required on new and replaced pipelines in and near HCAs, but we would like to see them on existing pipelines as well. Another really big priority of ours is requiring in-home methane detectors. New York City is now requiring them after Con Ed New York started a really amazing pilot program and has seen tremendous success with it. I believe Maine has required them as well. And so we are working on seeing more widespread adoption of in-home methane detectors, and think that that is a way that can really make an immediate large impact on saving people's lives. Thermal valves is another one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There's also, I don't think maybe there's too much discussion of this in Delaware, but nationwide there is a move to build out new CO2 pipelines. And those have been, relatively rare in the past and in relatively rural areas for enhanced oil recovery. But with the incentivization of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, we're seeing the potential for a big build out of CO2 pipelines, a lot more of them and a lot closer to communities. And they really do pose some serious safety risks that we don't think are addressed in the regulations. And so that's a big effort for us. Similarly, there's incentives around the production of hydrogen. And that is leading to finding ways to use that incentivized production of hydrogen, which includes blending of hydrogen into natural gas systems. Similarly to CO2, we think that that relatively rare practice now is not covered well enough in the safety standards, and we would like to see an update in the regulations. We actually don't think hydrogen blending should be permitted at all in distribution systems for the time being until more research is done and the standards are updated. Leak detection performance standards, there has been some progress on the gas side. PHMSA, of course, has their proposed rule that we're waiting on finalization for the gas side, but we don't have leak detection performance standards on the liquid side, which I know Delaware doesn't have authority over or much mileage on the liquid side, but there are no performance standards on leak detection systems. There's just a requirement to have one. We would like to see that more specific. Another big one is just public engagement in general. There's been a lot of focus, of course, because of industry standards and the adoption of those standards into the code around public awareness. And of course, that's incredibly important and has seen some success. But that's one-way communication from the operator to the public to let them know the risks and the location of the pipelines around them. We think that a lot of work remains on public engagement, which is a two-way conversation between the public and the operators and the regulators as well. API issued a recommended practice 1185, published that earlier this year, which had a lot of public involvement in the development of, including the Pipeline Safety Trust was a co-chair of that effort. And we think it's a great product. And we're really happy and pleased that with that recommended practice. And we're really hope to see adoption of that widespread around the industry. It unfortunately does not apply to gas distribution. I think a lot of the principles in there are universal to pipelines and could, of course, be adopted by distribution, but the recommended practice itself was written primarily for transmission. And so we would like to see a similar document be targeted towards distribution companies. Regulation of gathering lines, not a big, does not apply to Delaware, but that's another priority of ours. Regulatory funding is a big one, and seeing PHMSA get more funding, but even more importantly than PHMSA getting more funding is seeing the states get more funding. As you all know, most of the inspections, most of the mileage is under state authority and not PHMSA authority. And so much has come down the pike in new rules and regulations, which we are largely supportive of. But in order for them to be successful, you need to have the resources to implement them. And so there has been progress there. State funding was increased substantially with the last recently in Congress, and we would like to see that to continue. And then just generally regulatory transparency. A little bit about thermal valves. I don't think they're as widespread as some other tools, but they are basically it's a valve that's held open by a material with a low melting point. And if these really come into these are really helpful in fire first incidents. If there is a fire in the home, it can melt that material that's keeping the valve open, and it will shut off gas service into the home. They're widely commercial available. They are inexpensive to purchase, just like excess flow valves. However, I'll say, unlike excess flow valves, they're also extremely inexpensive to install. They've been used in Germany for decades. Massachusetts has been using them. And we would really like to see widespread adoption of these thermal valves. I talked a little bit about hydrogen. We are seeing, I haven't seen anything in Delaware, but part of the shortfall in the regulations is that operators don't need to report that they are blending hydrogen into their system. They only need to report the predominant product in the pipeline. And so we don't actually really know if where hydrogen blending projects are happening in distribution systems. They often will seek reimbursement through a rate case, and you find out that way. And I haven't seen anything in Delaware, but we are seeing blending projects pop up all over the country. And we issued a white paper a couple years ago about the unique risks that hydrogen pose to pipelines. Some things that are well known and understood, like embrittlement of steel, of course, but there's other aspects too. Just really around the physical properties of hydrogen, how easy it leaks out of infrastructure, how flammable it is, how explosive it is, as well as I think what's really not well understood yet is that so the production of hydrogen is being incentivized as a climate solution. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that hydrogen itself is an indirect greenhouse gas. It prolongs and intensifies methane's warming effect in the atmosphere. And given its propensity to leak and the poor leak detection technology in place for it, we may be introducing safety risks into a system and not doing much to contribute to climate solutions. And so we are asking, we would like to see more information about what kind of risks we're asking communities with these projects and for what benefit. And so I just want to put that on your radar if it isn't on your radar already.
Bill?
Just a little bit about pipeline safety being in Delaware and having zero incidents for so long. It's, I think, important to take that national look. We still do have a significant pipeline incident somewhere in this country almost every day. It's on average about 300 a year, a little less. And so they are still quite common. Another thing to point out is we hear a lot about excavator damage and third-party damage, which is of course a leading cause of fatalities and injuries, and we want to certainly prioritize that. But if we split out the different causes between those that are under an operator's direct control, things like equipment and weld failure, things like that, versus indirect, like third-party damage, we're actually seeing an upward trend in the causes, incidents caused by those under an operator's direct control versus indirect. This is looking at serious pipeline incidents, those that result in a fatality or injury by system. And the shaded area around that trend line shows you how confident we are in that trend line statistically. And so we really are not seeing a lot of progress, as you can see in the last few slides. But there is one area that we are making progress. And if there was one area we could make progress, I would say it would be on serious incidents on distribution lines, because those are the ones that lead to the majority of fatalities and injuries. So that is good news, but we still do have a lot of work to do there. The one thing we noticed, though, on the number of serious incidents is it doesn't account for incidents like the one that happened in Pennsylvania last year in West Reading, where it was one serious incident, one pipeline explosion, but it killed 7 people. And so we looked at the number of fatalities as opposed to the number of incidents that caused fatalities and injuries. The first chart there is over the last 20 years, and the second one is over the last 10. Last year, 2023, was actually the deadliest year for pipelines in a decade. And so over 20 years, we have made some progress. There is a trend line down, but you can see there's not a lot of confidence in it. It's not a strong trend in any way. and even less so over 10 years. And so our goal, and I think all of yours as well, is zero incidents. And zero incidents starts with, I think the first step would be zero fatalities. Stop killing people first. And you can see that we're not making progress fast enough there. This next one looks at the same information, but just for gas distribution. And you can see similar trends there, whereas a downward trend, but not very strong over 20 years, and not much of a trend at all over the last 10. And there is my contact information. I have an open door, would always love to hear feedback. Any way that we can do our jobs better, or anything you want to talk through, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Again, I really appreciate the invitation, and if there's any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to take them.
Bill, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you again. And I want to say that Delaware is going to be participating in the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub. And that so we are going to be one of the states participating in that. And
oh, okay. Do you know if that's intended to lead to any blending projects in distribution, or is that just production and moving it out in a dedicated hydrogen pipeline?
in our PSC with that, there's another gal here who's more about it, but I think it's production for sending it to industrial use.
Okay.
As of right now, that's what I think it is. I don't think it's like I've seen other states where they get the hydrogen from water and then blend a little bit as they're making it from water, blending it into the distribution. I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's about.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, we have a lot less concerns around, dedicated hydrogen pipelines that are built to carry hydrogen for industrial uses. We hope that they're sited far away from people and all of that, but I think we know a lot more about building a pipeline specifically to carry hydrogen than we do blending it into systems that were built for natural gas.
I went to the national NAPSTR meeting. I think it was up in Minnesota, and they had a blending plant where they were making it from. They were using very refined water, and then making hydrogen from that, and then putting it into the distribution.
Yeah, what I think a lot of people forget about with blending into a distribution system is the operator may feel like they know their system well enough and know that it's capable of handling hydrogen, but there's the other side of the meter that's non-jurisdictional, and we don't know the state of that infrastructure, and that's kind of what tips the scales for us in really opposing the blending into distribution systems.
I can understand even when we hadn't lost an inspector, but my one inspector he has concerns about having to do inspections of with hydrogen because it's more prone to leak.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can embrittle steel and certain plastics very quickly.
Any questions, anybody? I hope you all found it somewhat informative. Sorry about the power issue this morning. It was beyond our control, when they clobber a large part of the city for a while. So, all right. Well, we'll see you again in 3 years. All right. Thank you again for your attendance, and we'll be posting the videos when we edit them on the website, and maybe also with the slides that came with them. All right.
Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we're going to wrap everything up.